If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Hey, warm up, lovely low. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got a great podcast for you. Joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Eli Boettger aboard. He does such good work over at ECHECBB, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love, and we're going to be chatting with him about what he's been making out of some of these conference tournaments, some of what we want to be watching out for Sunday and beyond, how we've been just noticing some of these teams ascending/declining and how the committee might be taking that into perspective, some of the top teams in all of college basketball, and so much more. So, nice, wide-ranging conversation with Eli in segment number 2. In the final segment, gonna get you guys picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at GDN_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter. So, as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any of those Twitter/X questions today, but we did have a fun day of college basketball on Saturday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
After we had just seen a sea of unders in the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament, I mean, pretty much everything that wrapped up in regulation going into Saturday had gone under the total. We did get a pair of overs, and we've got Drake versus Indiana State in the final. Indiana State, they get the job done against Northern Iowa 94-72, and they were able to get the lid off the rim with going 15 of 29 from 3. Robbie Avila, along with Isaiah Swope, they combined to go 10 of 13 from three-point range, 36 points between the two of them. Ryan Conwell, 20 points, 13 rebounds, thorough domination here. And then for Drake, a little bit more nip and tuck, but they do get the job done against Bradley by kind of 72-67, as it was Aiden Wright who was Mr. Wright. 20 points, 5 of 7 from three-point. Chucker DeVries, 17 points, 6 boards, so that was very refreshing to be able to see. But we also have to talk about this, the fact that the top cover teams in all of college basketball had a little bit of a rough time of it on Saturday. For Minnesota, they got off to that big 24-4 against the spread start, and they're still doing a really good job of making you money thus far this season, but have to feel like the bookmakers have started to catch up just a little bit on them as they fall to Northwestern. This by a count of 90-66, dropping them down 24-7 against the spread, and Minnesota was just flat out dominating in this game. They actually go 7 of 16 from three-point range. Problem was Northwestern went 10 of 18 from three-point range as Boo Buie, he went for 23 points, 6 assists. Northwestern had 1 turnover in this game, by the way. Minnesota lost the turnover battle 10-1. You don't see that very often. Minnesota was able to play even up on the glass, and Dawson Garcia had 30 points. But when you have Northwestern just playing the way that they were on offense, there's not a whole heck of a lot you're going to be able to do. And then South Florida has been a really good cover team for you all season long. Entered into Saturday number 2 in the country with regards to cover rate. But we get online with our DK Network write-up picks. I felt like there was some regression coming for South Florida, and there was. As Tulsa as an underdog, they went outright by a count of 76-70. South Florida just could not get it going from three-point range. 4 of 23 from distance. Not like Tulsa was necessarily lighting the world on fire themselves. They go 7 of 24 from the outside, but PJ Haggerty was the best player in this game with 32 points. You had Kobe Williams also chip in there, 23 points, 11 boards, and for South Florida, you gotta love the fact that Kashawn Pryor had 29 points, 11 rebounds, but felt like there might have been a little bit of regression coming in. Boy, oh boy, there was. How about what is now the second best cover A team in all of college basketball? That would be Stony Brook. And they take down Northeastern. This by a count of 75-65. For Stony Brook, they were laying just a point and a half in this one. And the way that they were able to get it done is they went 9 of 20 from three-point range and 20 of 22 at the free throw line. Northeastern, 12 of 21 at the free throw line. That's going to cause a big dent in your game. Now, Northeastern actually won the rebound battle by a count of 42-36, but you were able to have Dean Noel go off for 23 points, for Stony Brook, and then a combined 40 points out of Tyler Stevenson Moore along with Aaron Clark. So a little bit of a top-heavy performance for Stony Brook, but a good one regardless. And what has also been very good to you all season long is taking a look at the overs in Alabama games, as Alabama has now played 23 overs to just 8 unders, and if you had this total over, you should be probably thanking your lucky stars on this one. Alabama, they get the win but no cover, 92-88 in overtime over Arkansas. This was a total of about 174 to 174.5. You had 74 points in regulation and then 32 in overtime. If you had the under in this spot, I don't know what to tell you, because that was a good call. Should have gotten there, but it did not. Alabama just has a magnetic force of being able to get overs in. And for Arkansas, they go 24 of 27 at the free throw line. This is one of their most spirited efforts of the season. Alabama wins the rebound battle by a count of 44-39, as you had double-doubles out of both Nick Pringle along with Grant Nelson, while 22 points out of Mark Sears was able to help out the cause as well. And for Arkansas, what was doomsday for them was the 16 turnovers in this game, as for Arkansas, they had 9 assists on 30 made buckets. That's been an issue for them all season long. What has been an issue is if you've been trying to fade South Carolina all season long, because this team just time and time again has been able to get the job done. Now 22-9 against the spread, 25-6 straight up. They go on the road, they take down Mississippi State in overtime, 93-89. For South Carolina, they go 20 of 24 at the free throw line. Colin Murray Boyles, our guy, 19 points, 8 boards, 6 assists, 4 steals, and a block. He was absolutely tremendous. Now Mississippi State does win the rebound battle by a count of 39-32, as you did have Josh Hubbard be able to supply the team with 28 points in this one. But for Mississippi State, they lose a turnover battle by a count of 12-8. For South Carolina, you're also able to have PJ the Mack Truck be able to supply 25 points, so they get the job done there. And for Kentucky versus Tennessee, this was one that was just barely able to hold to the under, but Kentucky with a road win over Tennessee, 85-81 the final, and Kentucky still one of your best over teams in all of college basketball. Now 22 overs to 9 unders for Kentucky. The way that they were able to get it done, Antonio Reeves was able to carve up this Tennessee defense, as Kentucky went 15 of 29 from distance. Reed Shepherd off the bench, 27 points, 7 of 10 from 3, 6 boards, 5 assists. Reeves had 27 of his own, and Dalton Knecht, well, he was connecting for Tennessee. He had 40 points, and Tennessee wins the turnover battle 16-7, but flat out they couldn't match the three-point shooting of Kentucky, and Kentucky also went 16 of 18 at the free throw line. Shows just the lethality, for lack of a better term, for this Kentucky team. How about Missouri finishing up the regular season winless in SEC play? Now, if you had LSU, this was a relatively rough beat. They were up 20 points with 4:40 remaining. The spread on this game was hovering right around that neighborhood of about 9 in a lot of spots. I mean, you might have gotten a little bit of a different number, but LSU should have been able to get a very easy cover, and they did not. 84-80 the final in this one, as for LSU, they do go 26 of 37 at the free throw line. Trey Annable was able to supply 24 points, and for Shawnee Stick-Honor, they go a combined 3 of 13 from 3-point range, but East was able to give you 26 points, and off the bench, Noah Carter, his 18 points, was able to get Missouri to a cover, and Missouri has been one of those worst teams in terms of cover rate in all of college basketball. They wrap up the regular season 9-22 against the spread. This has also been a very rough cover team all year long. Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin, they are 9-20 against the spread thus far this season, and for our good friends in Mr. Stephen F. Austin, they were able to get the winning cover over Utah Tech. This by a count of 84-71, so they were able to get one in there. This is just a Utah Tech team has been, in their own right, one of the more awful teams in all of college basketball. For Utah Tech, they go 6 of 19 from 3-point range, but they had 19 turnovers and they made 22 buckets. That's not great. Stephen F. Austin, they had 17 turnovers of their own, but 35 of 42 at the free throw line, with Nana Atio Biosico be able to give you 30 points. Went 10 of 12 at the free throw line. Latrell Jossel went 15 of 15 at the charity stripe. Would like to see perhaps a little bit more balance there, but you know what? You'll take it how you can get it if you're old Stone Cold Stephen F. Austin. It's been a rough year for Prairie View as well. Out there in the SWAC, they are 9-20 against the spread, and for Prairie View, they lose to Texas Southern by a count of 93-78. They did a good job of being able to force some turnovers, as Texas Southern, they did turn the ball over in this game 18 times, but they also went 14 of 30 from 3-point range. Prairie View always a traditionally rough 3-point shooting team, so that was not good to say the least. And, well, this team has just been rough the last few years in general. how about DePaul getting roughed up by Seton 86-62 the final? Now, this was a closing line of about 26.5, so you were able to get a cover with DePaul. This number just got a little bit too harebrained and crazy, but for DePaul, another pretty lifeless effort as they allowed Seton Hall to go 12 of 24 from 3. This is not a very good shooting team in Seton Hall, and for DePaul, they lost the turnover battle 15-11. They lose the rebound battle 33-22. So, yay verily for the fact that they got a cover, but not too great of a showing there. And out there in the Big East, you did see a nice showing from this bunch as Marquette, without Tyler Kolek, they get the job done against Xavier on the road, 86-80 the final, as it was Cam Jones who stepped up, 30 points, 9 assists. For Marquette, they go 8 of 19 from three-point range. It looked like a nice free-flowing offense. Meanwhile, Quincy Alveri did all that he could for Xavier. Goes 6 of 11 from 3. Once the team went 1 of 6 from distance, Alveri was able to supply the team with 32 points. Abdul Usman was able to give you 6 rebounds down low, but only 2 points. And Marquette did not do the world's worst job on the glass. They lose that battle 30-25. They're rather, shall we say, wobbly there, but they win the turnover battle 12-8. So they're able to get the job done, and they're able to get that cover. And for UConn, they have been in just an absolute machine the last few weeks as well. They take down Providence, and they're able to cover this number by a count of 74-60. As for Providence, they just weren't able to get stuck out of the mud. As for this UConn team, they held them to shooting from three-point range only 29.6%. As a whole, Providence was 8 of 27 from the outside, as Devin Carter did all that he could, 24 points, 15 rebounds. Joshua Drew, 13 points, 11 rebounds. But outside of those two guys, he really didn't get much else. Meanwhile, UConn, a much more well-rounded effort, as Alex Karaban goes 4 of 6 from three-point range. Donovan Klingen, pair of blocks, 7 rebounds, 11 points. So another good effort from UConn, who's now 20-11 against the spread. And Marquette, low-key, they're 18-12 against the spread themselves. So both of these teams have been able to do a solid job there. In the Big 12, you saw a lot of just rambunctious action on Saturday, as well as you saw Kansas just get absolutely housed by Houston, 76-46 the final. And it's been a rough against the spread year for Kansas, 13-17-1 against the spread. You saw Hunter Dickinson leave this game with a shoulder injury. He, before that, went for 11 points, 6 rebounds, and for Kansas, they go 3 of 21 from three-point range, 18 turnovers of 15 made field goals. Meanwhile, Jamal Shedd just continues to be that well-rounded guy for Houston. 8 assists, 2 turnovers, 13 points, 6 rebounds. You were able to get 11 big points out of LJ Cryer as well. Damian Dunn was able to get her done with 12 points, so thorough domination there. And Iowa State, who's been 20-10-1 against the spread, a little bit of a hiccup against Kansas State. Kansas State gets a nice 65-58 win, as for Kansas State, they shoot 7 of 24 from three-point range compared to Iowa State, who goes just 5 of 17 from distance. And the big key for Kansas State, they were able to play relatively even up in terms of the turnover battle. They had 15 turnovers to Iowa State's 14, and you did have David N'Guessan off the bench have 16 rebounds, as Kansas State won that rebound battle as well by a count of 36-27. So a little bit of a rough one there for Iowa State. For Baylor, they have been able to do a nice job of covering spreads all year long at 18-10-2 against the spread, but not on this day. Texas Tech, they get the job done by a count of 78-68 as a modest 2.5 point favorite. They're able to get the job done. As for Baylor, they have been very shaky with their 3-point shooting percentage since conference play has began. They go on this one just 5 of 21 from 3-point range now. They actually won the turnover battle 11-9, but for Texas Tech, they also win the rebound battle by a count of 40-30. Darion Williams, 16 points, 11 boards. Pappas Isaac was able to give you 20 points as well, so a big-time effort there. What has been a big-time effort all season long has been fading Texas, as they're just 12-19 against the spread, but they get the win and cover against Oklahoma by a count of 94-80, and man, this Oklahoma team is really skidding into the NCAA tournament as of right now. They were able to get that nice overtime win against Cincinnati, and they've been able to cover a few numbers recently, but they go 10 of 28 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Texas, 22 of 23 at the free throw line, 6 of 12 from three-point range. Tyrese Hunter, 30 big points, perhaps his best game as a Texas Longhorn. Meanwhile, for Oklahoma, you did have 21 points in this one out of Rivaldo Suarez, but the other guys, they just weren't able to step up, and Texas was just too hot to handle on this day. If you're looking at other teams from the top 25 that were able to do battle on this Saturday, how about what we saw in that Creighton versus Villanova game? Creighton gets up by a count of 32-8. It looks like this game is completely done. And heck, for Creighton, they were up 14 points with 6 minutes and change remaining. Villanova comes all the way back to tie it with mere seconds left before Trey Alexander is able to seal the deal for Creighton. Creighton goes 13 of 37 from 3. Villanova 9-20 from 3, and Villanova has now allowed fewer than 70 points in all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of February. Eric Dixon had 25 points, Justin Moore had 17, but the rest of the team really did not show up too much in this one. Meanwhile, for Creighton, it's the big three: Ryan Kalkbrenner, Baylor Shireman, along with Trey Alexander. They did a nice job supplying the team with a combined 49 points. You also did see a just absolute thriller between New Mexico and Utah State. Utah State does not get the cover. They were a 4.5-point favorite, but they do just enough to be able to get the job done in this one. 87-85, the final. As for New Mexico, they go 6 of 15 from three-point range, and they did a relatively solid job on the glass. They won that battle 36-29, but for this New Mexico team, just the fact that you weren't able to get a little bit more in this one out of some of the ancillary pieces was relatively tough. You did have Mustafa Amzil coming off the bench for 18 points, but Great Osabor, he was great. 21 points, 12 rebounds. You also had Ian Martinez supply 22 points, go 3 of 6 from three-point range. Just an absolute thrilling and fun win in general. And UNLV has been able to rise up in terms of the Mountain West, but perhaps their run at an NCAA tournament berth probably came to a screeching halt on Saturday, unless if they can win the Mountain West tournament. They lose to Nevada 75-65, and Nevada now 20-10 against the spread. UNLV 18-9 against the spread, but for UNLV, they go just 7-24 from three-point range. Nevada, just a very well-coached team that's doing the little things. So I will say Nevada actually lost the turnover battle 11-8 in this one, but they had Jared Lucas. And Jared Lucas, he had 26 points. That's a nice deodorant there. And also out there in the Mountain West, I was referring to New Mexico and the fact that they were able to get cover on Saturday. They're now 19-11 against the spread. The team has been all sorts of ghastly in terms of making you money. Has been Air Force 10-20 against the spread, and they get housed by Colorado State, this by kind of 82-73. Because they were catching 11.5 points, they were able to get a cover. As Air Force, they do shoot north of 40% from three-point range. Air Force 9-22 from three-point range. Meanwhile, for Colorado State, they shot 66% from the floor. Just 6 of 17 from three-point range. So on their two-point shots, they go 21 out of 25. And for the Colorado Rams, only about 8 turnovers in this one. Isaiah Stevens, he was able to do a nice job for Colorado State with being able to chip in their 29 points. And then another team has been relatively rough against the spread as well has been his Wyoming team. They're just 12-16 against the spread, but Fresno State is 13-17. And Fresno State, thanks for showing up on your own floor. 86-47. They just get absolutely cooked in this one. As for Wyoming, they go 11-26 from three-point range. Fresno State, they shoot 28.5% from the floor. They lose a rebound battle 41-29. So that was a little bit of a less than savory effort out of them. And then, by the way, to just clean up with regards to what we're seeing in terms of overs with Air Force as well, they've been one of your best over teams in all of college basketball. 20 overs to just 9 unders thus far this season. There's been a push along the way as well, but your best under team in all of college basketball, that would actually be the Dukes of Duquesne, and they played another under on Saturday, 67-65. They get the win over George Washington, nowhere near covering the 10.5 point spread, but Jimmy Clark and Day Grant have really been the lone two scoring options for this team. They combined for 31 points, with Clark being able to supply 22 points. And for George Washington, they hold in there thanks to the fact that you're able to get a combined 36 points out of Darren Buchanan along James Bishop in a game where neither of these teams were really knocking down shots. For George Washington, they shoot about 45.5% from the floor. Ditto for Duquesne. This game got slowed down, so you had another under out there. Vermont has also been one of your top under teams in all of college basketball. Out there in the American East, they've played 21 unders to just 9 overs, and they survived an advance against Albany. 75-72 the final. This was a closing total of 144.5, so the same game does go over, but Albany was leading throughout, but Vermont, they get on the comeback trail. They shoot just 4 of 16 from three-point range, and for Albany, they actually go 10 of 10 at the free throw line, but for Vermont, the way that they won this game, ball control. 11 turnovers for Albany, just 7 for Vermont. You had Sebastian Thomas go off for 31 points, but not having Jonathan Beagle, the main big man for Albany, that did turn out to be very costly for them, so you get yourself yet another win for Vermont, and they are going to be looking to go back to the NCAA tournament. Another team has been incredible for you to the under thus far this season. That'd be the Old Marist Foxes, and they play a slog against Niagara. 63-62. The total of 131.5 goes well under the total, and for Niagara, they just continue to cover games on the road. I don't know how they've been able to do it, but you take a look at this Niagara team. Against the spread in true road games, they are now 13-3 against the spread. The only team that has really been much better in terms of percentage, Valparaiso and Georgia. which that's very strange. South Carolina, we'll give them a shout out too. They're 9-2 against the spread away from home, but for Niagara, they go 8 of 16 from 3-point range, 12 of 12 at the free throw line. They play even up on the glass, but for Marist, they did a little bit of a better job down low. That allows them to be able to get the job done, but once again, another spirited effort out there. Siena has been one of your bigger fates in all of college basketball as well, and yay verily to the fact that as a 14.5 point favorite, they lost by only 14 points to be able to get you a cover as they lose by a count of 68-54. It's just been a rough year out there for them, to say the least, and unfortunately our top over team in all of college basketball, we cannot comment on Wright State as they are 23 overs to 7 unders, but they got knocked out of the Rising League tournament. Alabama and Arkansas did battle. They're both 22 or 23 overs, 8 unders, and a push, but the Denver Pioneers, they have been pioneering a bunch of overs thus far this season, and out there in the Summit League tournament, they play a 61-60 slog in which they survive and advance in. Not what you expected, but that said, they were able to get the job done as Tommy Bruner, top scorer in all of college basketball, only 16 points to 6 turnovers in this one, but UMKC, they go just 8 of 29 from 3-point range, and for Denver, 9 of 15 at the free throw line. UMKC, 12 of 19 at the charity stripe, but for UMKC, even though they win the rebound battle 42-38, the fact that they just could not hit shots. They shoot 32.3% from the floor, more around 39.5% for Denver. They win a low-scoring bleeder and slog of a game. Another team has been able to cash you quite a few overs is Idaho State out there in the Big Sky. They do not get the over in this one, so now they are at a rate of 19 overs, 9 unders, and a push as they win against Northern Arizona by a count of 68-60. This total was about 10 points short, but did have Braden Parker be able to supply 18 points, and they were able to advance in that conference tournament. And then you have to bring this up with regards to one of the smaller conference tournaments out there in the Coastal Conference tournament. How about Hampton just getting absolutely blown out? They were down 51-16 at the half against Delaware. They actually won the second half, but they lost the game 80-50 the final line. There was a point in this game where Delaware was up 70-23. I mean, my goodness. This was just really, really sad and just pathetic to watch, to say the least. So that was not good, to say the least. But you did have Towson be able to cash in another under. They take down old William & Mary by a kind of 67-56. And when it comes to the Coastal Conference, the team that has really been able to make you some good money thus far this season has been Monmouth. And Monmouth, they absolutely laid it on the Campbell Fighting Camels. This by a count of 90-67. Monmouth now 20-11-1 against the spread themselves, as you had Nikita Konstantinovsky be able to give the team 15 points, and they did this with Xander Rice only going 2 of 9 from 3-point range with just 12 points, as for Monmouth, it was a whole as greater than the sum of its parts effort. In this one, they shoot 55.5% from the floor, and for Campbell, they had 13 turnovers and 19 made buckets, so that was not too tremendous for them. But what is tremendous is taking a look at this great game of college basketball right now, and over the last 7 days, the unders are starting to take hold as we're getting more and more conference tournament action. 149 unders to 144 overs. We've had a few pushes along the way as well, but home underdogs are just taking it on the chin. 31-49-1 against the spread in the last 7 days. If you're looking at the entirety of the college basketball season, this is going to be one of the worst seasons on record for home underdogs. 7-21, 7-71, and 24 against the spread. So road favorites are hitting at 51.7% in college basketball, and the overs overall for the season hitting at 51.1%. 2,714 overs to 2,601 under. So that's what we're looking at in college basketball right now, and that's what we all got on Saturday. Now let's turn it forward to Sunday, and let's take a look at this conference tournament action. Let's take a look at the top teams in college basketball, teams in good and bad form, and so much more with Eli Boettger of HeatCheck CBB. We're going to be having that chat up next right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the Beast Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beast Family Podcast. And it is always great to be joined by this man, as Eli Boettger. He does such amazing work. Taking a look at this great game of college basketball over at HeatCheck CBB. He's actually the founder of HeatCheck CBB, and he and the staff over there have done absolutely amazing work all season long. Taking a look at this tremendous game that we all know and love. For Eli, much like myself, he is out here on the West Coast, and I'm sure that he's going to be taking in a lot of these conference tournaments out here in lovely Las Vegas throughout the weekend. You're able to follow him on Twitter/X at Boettger_Eli, and that last name is spelled Boettger. And Eli, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Absolutely, Greg. Always a pleasure to hop on, especially this time of year. So I'm excited to get going.
Oh, I am very excited as well. And first things first, before we dive in on some of these conference tournaments and all the hoopla that we have been seeing, how should we be evaluating some of these teams that they are actually going to be dealing with a different coach this time of year than what we've been seeing all year long? Because I know that you're a man that's out there in the great state of Washington. We saw Mike Hopkins get the boot of Rudy about 48 or so hours ago. As we know, a team like Ohio State that we're going to be seeing on Sunday, it's been a few games for them, but they made a little bit of an in-season coaching change as well. How do we evaluate these teams that they're going through a coaching change? Because there are a few of them that actually have a case to perhaps make the NCAA tournament like Ohio State does with an interim coach.
It's fascinating. I think to start with, Ohio State, with the job that Jake Diebler has done, has been really remarkable and impressive to turn the ship around given what Ohio State was looking like in the latter weeks of the Chris Holtmann era. But they've been finishing the Big Ten slate with a massive bang and have wins over Purdue and Michigan State, Nebraska, all three teams that will be in this year's tournament. But it's a fascinating situation, mostly because we know how the sport works nowadays and the transfer portal, which gets started, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, before it really does get started. I know that a lot of these deals and a lot of these conversations happen really before they are supposed to. And I just have to imagine in these cases when there is quite a bit of uncertainty with coaches who have been released, or in some cases we may see hot seat coaches and there's just quite a bit of uncertainty with that, that it has to be even more challenging to get players to contribute and to remain focused on just going out and performing, which is especially important this time of year. An incredible job that Jake Diebler has done. In other situations, like with Mike Hopkins at Washington, of course, he's going to finish out the season with the Huskies, but it has been, again, another lost season for Washington. It has had no shortage of talent in recent years. It just hasn't quite fit together. The puzzle just hasn't quite fit together properly. So I'd have to imagine, as is the case with a lot of these teams, there's probably going to be a lot of interest for some of the young Washington players who have contributed this season. That's kind of the status quo for how it works this time of year. So a lot of moving parts. Some teams at the top of the ladder of college basketball are competing for seeding, at-large candidacy. Some are just trying to keep the pieces together, and some are in complete teardown mode. So there are so many different phases this time of year, and it's really interesting to see how it plays out for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, it is going to be really interesting. And when it comes to this time of year, there's just so many things to take a look at. As we know, it's just one and done for so many of these teams trying to be able to bust through and make the NCAA tournament. As Eli Boettger, who does such great work over at ECHECBB, is joining me on Coast to Coast Hoops. And in your opinion, how much do you think that the committee is going to be taking a look at recent form? Because I feel like a team like Wisconsin, them being able to avoid what would have been a ghastly loss against Rutgers a few days ago, that should be enough for them to get into the NCAA tournament. But, I mean, it's been a season of ebbs and flows. Even though South Florida lost on Saturday, they were a team that really surged. A team like Loyola Chicago, I think, is very interesting because we do have a lot of teams that, if you look at their overall season metrics, they either look not too impressive but are surging late, or they look relatively decent but they've been in poor form recently. How do you think they're going to really strike this balance?
That's a great question. I think that what I can say is the selection committee no longer has that win-loss record over the last 10 games on the team sheets anymore. That was something that was heavily discussed for quite some time, that now that the committee is so focused on the full body of work, it shouldn't be about the last 10 games. But the more that I've thought about it personally is I think a lot has to be taken into consideration, particularly how teams are playing right now compared to where their status was like in November and December, because at the end of the day, a lot of these teams are different than they were back in November and December. That's just the fact of the matter, whether it's injuries, whether it's different players who have developed or underclassmen who have stepped up and taken on bigger roles. That's just the status of a lot of these teams. And you touched on Wisconsin in particular. This, for a while, was a Badgers team that was looking like a high 2 seed possibly. And for the last month or so, they've been one of the worst teams in the Big Ten. And of course, it's not to say that Wisconsin's at risk of missing the NCAA tournament. They've more than solidified their position there. But this isn't the same team that started 16-4 and had an 8-1 record in Big Ten play. I think right now it's been more so the team that's been 3-7 in their last 10. So I think at the end of the day, if the status for the selection committee is that they're taking a full body of work, well, Wisconsin is at present not a very difficult team to match up against. They just aren't. And so I think at the end of the day, that means that a lot of these teams that haven't been performing well of late are probably going to be seated higher than what the level of performance that they're actually putting on right now. So that's something to monitor as we take a look at the bracket and what that's going to be here in a week or so. But definitely a lot of teams that are trending in different directions, whether they're getting hot right now or they're really just trying to make the field or trying to string together some momentum for the next week or so.
Absolutely, and I think that is going to be such a fascinating dynamic, and I think that that's going to make the NCAA tournament just oh so interesting. And when we take a look at the games for Sunday, a lot of these are still TBD as we are doing this show, because we've got a lot of situations where, like in the Missouri Valley Conference tournament and everything like that, it's surviving events to be able to get there. And it's right now looking like we might get Drake versus Indiana State in that Missouri Valley Conference final. But how do you take a look at Indiana State, regardless of if it is going to be Bradley or Drake in that Missouri Valley Conference final? Because I feel like this team is an absolute buzzsaw, but the intrigue comes in where if Indiana State loses this game, would they still be safe for the NCAA tournament? Because I certainly think that they're worthy. I don't do any bracketology whatsoever, so I can't say for sure that I know the nuances with regards to resume, but I do think that regardless, they're going to have a chance to be able to pick up a relatively solid win, and the Missouri Valley Conference in general just has been putting out a high level of basketball this year in general.
They have. It's been impressive with this conference, and especially Arch Madness, I think, brings out some of the very best that this conference has seen, and there are some serious studs in this league with Indiana State, with Drake. Even Bradley's been a team that's kind of come on late and has played some really good basketball. And it seems like more often than not, the team that represents this conference either puts up a significant fight in the NCAA tournament or pulls off an upset. We've seen that plenty out of the Missouri Valley. In regards to Indiana State, of course, a ton of respect for what this team has done this season, and the job that has been done with the Sycamores program by Josh Schertz has been really impressive. I love the way that they play offensively. It's tough nowadays without a Wichita State or Creighton or Loyola Chicago in this league anymore to pick up those necessary quality wins to get at-large consideration. But just based on the metrics alone, Indiana State sitting somewhere around top 30 in a lot of these metrics between KenPom and net. It's at least good enough for consideration. Of course, they have a quad 4 loss, which makes things difficult. And as of right now, just one quad 1 victory. So that's a tough standing to be in, especially if you're on a bubble. But advancing at least to the title game in the NBC helps out significantly for their chances to make it into the dance. And I feel like a lot of folks would really want to see an Indiana State team that is as explosive offensively as just about any team in the country.
Yeah, this Indiana State team has been so much fun to watch, as that's one of those mid-majors that is certainly on my radar. And outside of Indiana State, because I think that is very clear, that's one of those mid-major teams that you want to watch. Hopefully somehow, some way they get into the NCAA tournament, because I want to see them there. But are there a few other teams that come to mind that are outside the Power Six that might be fighting for an NCAA tournament bid right now that you want to see in the NCAA tournament because you feel like they could be a team that, given the right matchup in like a 13 seed, 14 versus 3 matchup, something like that, they might have the chance to be able to pull off an upset?
There are a lot of teams that fall into that mix right now. I think if we're still talking about at-large consideration type of teams, I would have to imagine that New Mexico fits into that picture just based on the explosiveness that this team has. It's a really, really skilled and talented backcourt with Jalen House, Donovan Dent, and Jamal Mashburn. And at their peak, I think that this team has legitimate second weekend potential. But the problem with that is their floor is also pretty darn low, including a recent home loss to Air Force. That was a loss that this team just could not afford this time of year. And now it's more so a matter of the Lobos even squeaking into the field. And as of right now, I've seen a lot of people who are picking New Mexico to most likely land in Dayton. So they have plenty of work to do, and that's going to be a fascinating case with the New Mexico program. But another team, and of course with where their gaudy win-loss record is probably not going to fly under the radar a whole lot, but the job that Will Wade has done with McNeese, the Cowboys have been just phenomenal this season. And to stand 28-3 after this just remarkable regular season that they've had, super balanced on both ends of the floor. There isn't really a whole lot of weaknesses out of this team. And it's impressive to say that out of a team that comes from the Southland Conference, which by and large has been one of the weaker conferences in all of college basketball in recent years, especially when they lost teams like Abilene Christian and Stephen F. Austin to the WAC. But of course, I don't believe that McNeese is going to be an at-large consideration if they don't win the Southland tournament. But as of right now, if they're a team that lands on, say, the 12 seed line or the 13 seed line, going up against any squad that has taken care of business the way that they have, to go on the road and beat VCU. I know they also took down Michigan. Of course, not the Michigan team that we expected, but this team has just been dominant throughout the year. There aren't many weaknesses with Will Wade's bunch. They've got a lot of scoring pop too, guys like Shahada Wells and Christian Shoemate. I like this team. They have a lot of experience, and I think that it could be a situation where you could see McNeese on the 12 line, and they could probably get a lot of publicity as a potential upset pick, and I'd be really intrigued to see what they could do.
Yeah, and there's no question about it. This team is able to knock off good competition. Now, granted, the win over Michigan, that has aged like milk because Michigan has just been absolutely awful. And they're finding themselves as a 6-point underdog at home against Nebraska on Sunday, so how the mighty have fallen. But I do agree with you. Lots of intrigue there. As joining me on the show, we do have our good friend Eli Boettger of VCheck CBB right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And Eli, we are going to be seeing one of the best teams in all of college basketball take the floor. And I was mentioning it, Wisconsin should be safe from being eliminated from the NCAA tournament or anything like that, as they're going to be taking on Purdue. And if you lose to Purdue, there's absolutely no shame there. But how do you just evaluate the top teams in all of college basketball? And where do you think Purdue does stand there? Because I really feel like the big three has become the Boilermakers, obviously, the Houston Cougars, and what UConn is doing has been almighty impressive. And I do think that's sort of a pick your poison between the three, but want to see if you've got one out of these three that maybe you like a little bit more, or a team that's outside those three.
That's a good question. I think that's what's on everybody's mind right now is those big three, and if there are any other teams that could potentially join them. I think the first teams that you have to mention would probably be Arizona, which of course is a group that I have been, I would say, a bit lower than most, at least throughout the season. They've had a few head-scratching losses. They've had a few performances where they let some teams hang around. And overall, the Pac-12 just hasn't been very good this season, so they're also somewhat limited in the number of opportunities they can have to make statement wins. But, of course, beat Duke in Cameron to start the season. That was really what cemented this team and put them on the national radar. So Arizona, I think, has some boom or bust potential, of course, depending on what Caleb Love does. He's had a career year, but it's a lot of these secondary pieces as well. They need Pella Larson to step up, Keelan Boswell. He's performed at a high level this season, but there has been some inconsistencies there. So I think Arizona's probably in that conversation, depending on what version of them you get. Tennessee probably there too, but my concern right now, as incredible as Dalton Connect has been, I almost sometimes feel like this team is a little bit over-reliant on Connect to get them buckets, and in some instances, I think that makes them a little one-dimensional. So I just think you need to have far more consistent scoring options, and outside of Zakai Ziegler, I don't really the consistency from guys like Josiah Jordan-James or Santiago Vescovi, it hasn't been there for me. And Connect has been incredible, but I just need to see a little bit more in terms of secondary scorers for this team. The other one I'd probably throw into that bunch, maybe a bit of a late riser, is Creighton. This was my preseason national title pick, so maybe I'm a little bit biased in that sense, but Creighton's played some fantastic basketball this last month or so. Really, their only loss has been on the road at St. John's, but Baylor Shireman's been playing like one of the best players in the entire country of late. Of course, they're always going to have a size advantage and some great defensive chops underneath with Ryan Kalkbrenner. And then, of course, they have some serious offensive weapons with Trey Alexander and Stephen Ashworth, who's been a little bit under the radar in terms of what we were expecting out of him from the transfer portal when he came over from Utah State. But I think Creighton, if we're looking for a dark horse right now, I would not be surprised if Creighton's a team that we look up and maybe see make a surprise Final Four run and then have a chance to really do some damage. I think this team is legit so long as they can defend at a high level. That's probably the six that I would have for a national title pick right now, of course, in addition to what you mentioned with Houston, UConn, and Purdue as well.
And I think that it is so interesting to take a look at a team like Creighton, because when it comes to March, are there certain attributes that you look at for a team that you might be a little bit more bullish/bearish on? Because the one thing with Creighton is it feels like they can knock off any team in the country, but they're also prone to an upset. Like we saw them be able to knock off UConn. They completely dominated them. And then earlier in the season, they lose by double figures against a UNLV team that little did we know that they were going to be able to have the rise that they have in the Mountain West. But I look at a team like Creighton because they are a lower possession team, because they do take quite a few threes, are a little bit of a higher variance team. And do you like to take a look at those teams a little bit more, or do you look to a team like, say, Houston, for example, which they're going to be playing very low possession, but they really hang their head on defense, they're going to grab the rebounds, guard the three, but they themselves are not necessarily that super explosive team, and they're not going to get out of sorts?
That's a good point. I think with Houston in particular, you know what you're going to get out of them, and that can work to their benefit. In most cases, it's, of course, at the end of the day, can a team that is shooting somewhere in the 200s nationally, is that a team that is able to cut down the nets? And traditionally, the case has been no. At least of the recent national champions, I want to say that 2017 North Carolina is really the only team that's been outside of the top 100 nationally in shooting percentages, whether that's effective field goal percentage or just overall field goal percentage. So that's a bit of an uphill battle to climb. But of course, with Jamal Shed running the show, I think has been just tremendous this season, has made some huge baskets. And they've had really nice contributions from guys like LJ Cryer and Emmanuel Sharp, and are always going to defend at a high level. And that's always going to create a difficult matchup for a lot of the teams that, of course, as you said, are maybe a bit over-reliant or at least need to put the ball in the basket to win basketball games. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case for Houston. They have the ability to grind it out. But in terms of the metrics that I look at, I think the one that always stands out to me is you need to have three legitimate scorers on the court at all times, and usually guys who can create their own basket, because as we saw last season with Purdue, and of course it was a historic meltdown that they had against Fairleigh Dickinson, but what was apparent to me was that there wasn't a guy on the floor who could just go out and create his own shot. And Braden Smith, to his credit, has developed that within his game this season, but Mason Gillis isn't necessarily a player who you could give the basketball to and count on him to make a basket at the end of the shot clock. Fletcher Lawyer didn't really have that at that point yet. The ability of some of these teams to have three backcourt scorers, or at least a wing scorer that can go out and create their own bucket, I think is huge. And that's probably the reason why a lot of folks are buying in heavily into this Kentucky team, another team that's been pretty fascinating, even though they don't defend at a high level really at all. But they've got some serious scorers on their team. Rob Dillingham has been great off the bounce. Antonio Reeves is one of the highest scorers under John Calipari. They've been able to get a ton of production from that sense. Reed Shepherd as well, of course, another phenomenal freshman there. So that's the main thing that I look to, is guys who can create their own basket and aren't over-reliant on one player. And that's maybe a reason why I'm a little bit more bearish on Tennessee, because they are a little bit more, in that sense, pretty reliant on Dalton Connect at this point, and need a little secondary option at some point in these games.
Yep, I do agree with you. I do like the fact that Tennessee by committee is able to hit the glass, and guys like Josiah Jordan-James are so awesome. But that said, even though they've been looking oh so impressive this year, it just lingers in the back of my mind what we've seen out of Rick Barnes' teams in the NCAA tournament. I'm not even going to say March, because year in and year out, Tennessee typically does well in the SEC tournament as well. But just when the bracket is unveiled, it's as if they lose their superpowers. So going to be very interesting to watch them this season. And it's always great to be able to have you aboard, Eli. You do such a great job observing this tremendous game that we all know and love of college basketball. You and everyone else over there at eCheck CBB do amazing work. So all the good people at home know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Absolutely, Greg. As always, you can follow us on Twitter and on Instagram at HeatCheckCBB, and all of our written content and video content are on HeatCheckCBB.com as well. And just always a pleasure to hop on, talk college hoops, especially this time of year. I know we've got hundreds of games coming up this next week, so an exciting time for sure.
It certainly is a great time of year, and it's always a great time to get Eli aboard, because he does such a great job taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. Big thanks to Eli Boettger for joining me on Cusco Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday, as we hit some bank shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It's always a pleasure to be joined by Eli Boettger. He does such good work over at eCheck CBB, taking a look at this tremendous game of basketball that we all know and love. I know that he and everyone else over there at HXCBB locked in for what is going to be a tremendous NCAA tournament, what is going to be a great week of conference tournaments as well, and every single time he joins this podcast, always lends great insight. So big thanks to him for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast. I give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Sunday as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that as per usual, any changes are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at unit_81, and we're going to be going in the last exhortation order. This is where we go with the games that are not a part of a conference tournament and involve bigger conferences first. Then we go pretty much in tip time with these conference tournaments, as going to be beginning with the Coastal Conference. From there, you're going to be getting the final of the Missouri Valley, the SoCon, list goes on. And then in the extra games, you're going to be getting pretty much these smaller conferences by order of tip time with regards to those conference tournaments, like Big South. Then that final is going to be up first, Atlantic Sun, Patriot League, and then Southland. So how about if we get things started with 801, 802 on the betting board? It is Nebraska. They hit the road. They're facing off against Michigan. Michigan, a underdog at home of 6 points. Total on this game is 149. Man, this has been a ghastly Michigan team, but this is also a Nebraska team that has had so many issues on the road as well. This Nebraska team is a night and day different team when they're at home rather than on the road. For Nebraska, 18-1 at home. They have won just 2 games on the road, so that makes things a little bit difficult, but I did set Nebraska as a 5.5 point favorite. At the 6, that is my buy point on Michigan. You still have firepower with this Michigan offense. You still have Doug McDaniels able to give you 16.5 points, 4.5 assists. Now, we'll say this, it's supposed to be a case where Michigan is pretty much all gas, no brakes in terms of their offense, and the fact that they have fallen outside the top 100 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis, that is not great to say the least. As a matter of fact, 183rd, but keep in mind that McDaniel was suspended for all those road games. It's a big reason why this Michigan team has been averaging right around about 9 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road or neutral court environment, though we'll say this as well, this is also a Michigan team as well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Again, they have been better when they've been at home. It's not saying a whole heck of a lot, but they still have been a little bit of a more, I guess you'd call it, less horrible team. And then you've got a Nebraska team on the flip side that has Casey Shomanaga, has been able to do a nice job being able to supply the team with 14 points, shoots 36% from 3, but as awesome as he is with his shot making, he really doesn't do anything else. And then you got Rink Masters able to give you 8 boards, 13 points per contest. Everyone else around him pretty well-rounded. Juwan Gary, Bryce Williams, they all give you about 12 to 12.5 points per contest, combined for 12 boards between those two guys. And I do think that Nebraska is going to be able to do a relatively solid job on the glass, but that is the one place where Michigan has not been completely outgunned this year. Even though they are going to be without Olivier Kamwa for the rest of the season, they've got Terrace Reed, who's been able to give you 7 rebounds per game. They've been able to get a little bit of production out of Nabari Burnett. He's been up and down, 9.5 points, 4 boards. He's a very all-or-nothing player, but that's it. With Michigan, they're about 169th in the country in terms of their rebound rate. This is the Nebraska unit that's about 152nd, and Nebraska is a bunch that, when they're away from home, they do allow opponents to shoot north of 35% from three-point range. So it's an interesting circumstance here because this Michigan team, it does feel like they've been a little bit out of sorts with their offense just because it's been touch and go with Doug McDaniel being in the fold and then being out of the fold, and that has hurt them quite a bit, and this is going to be an early tip time. So I did set my total at a 147.5 as a result. I'm going to be looking at the under, but with Michigan, need at least 6. I can't take anything less than 6, but at a 6, going to be willing to take those points. 803, 804 on the betting board. Purdue is going to be playing us to Wisconsin. Wisconsin is an underdog of 9 points. For your total, it is 148 to 149. Set Purdue as a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Ding dong, the witch is dead, as Wisconsin was able to get a win a few days ago. This is still a Wisconsin team that is very much struggling with regards to their defense. They are 197th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, in terms of raw points allowed on a per possession basis, ball outside the top 165, and they just don't guard the arc to save their lives. Wisconsin, 339th in the country country. And opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, that balloons up to 39.7% away from home. That's a bottom 8 mark in all of college basketball. That's Michigan level bad with regards to opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. And they go up against a Purdue unit that, while we look at Giant of the Year Zach Edey and all that he's able to do, and it's amazing, 24 points, he's able to throw in there 11.5 rebounds, few blocks per contest. So even though Wisconsin has become a top 50 team in terms of rebound rate, with Stephen Kroll alongside the wall being able to combine for about 13.5 rebounds per game, they're outgunned there. But this Purdue team, just up and down the boulevard, they've got so many guys that are able to pop it from 3-point range. As a matter of fact, out of your top 8 scorers, all but one of them shoot at least 40% from 3-point range, and that would be the 35.7% 3-point shooting of Lance Jones. Braden Smith has been so incredible, 7 assists, 6 boards, 13 points per contest, shoots 45.5% from 3-point range. And as much as we want to talk about this Purdue defense, they're number 3 in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and per possession, they are the most efficient offense in all of college basketball when they are at home. It has been a Purdue defense that has been a little bit touch and go throughout the season. They're 87th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they do a nice job of tightening up the screws when they're at home. They allow 9 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road/neutral venue. The only question is, are you going to be able to get enough possessions for an over? Because Wisconsin, even though they have been quite ghastly with their defense, they're still one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, 317th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. And you got a Purdue unit that they're playing faster than they did a season ago, but it's not like they're gunning it either. They're 163rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And if you've been watching this Purdue team recently, we have really seen a downtick with regards to their total amount of possessions in their last, we're going to call it about 5 or so games. They're playing at a clip of about 4 to 5 possessions fewer than they did towards the beginning part of the season. For Wisconsin, you do have A.J. Storrs able to give you 16 points per contest, but he hasn't necessarily shot it well from 3-point range. He's only shooting about 31.5% from distance. Wisconsin does a nice job taking care of the ball with about 10 turnovers per contest, and this has been a Wisconsin unit that overall has been a pretty good team in terms of just flowing good offense, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're 44th in the country, but that does fall off by about 12.5 points per 100 possessions, and man, Wisconsin has 3 straight up wins since the beginning of the month of February. So circumstance where I did set my total 144, I do think that this is going to be a bogged down slow game. I'm going to be looking at the under, and with Purdue willing to lay up to 9.5 with them, I think that they overwhelm Wisconsin. 805, 806 on the betting board is going to be the DK Network right pick. Rutgers plays host to Iowa State. This is a pick'em game with your total at 134. I'm going to be going with the Rutgers on this pick'em line as my write-up. I set them as a 2.5 point favorite. Now, the Rutgers offense has been ghastly. They are 331st in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but what you do have going for this Rutgers team is that they've been able to get a little bit of a breath of life ever since Jeremiah Williams has come into the fold. He's become their top scorer with 13 points, 3 assists per contest, and with him out there on the floor, he returned 10 games ago. The team is averaging 3.9 points more per 100 possessions than they did without him, and they go up against an Iowa State unit that has not been great in terms of their defense, and the biggest reason why is that they have been rough around the perimeter. They are 310th in all of college basketball in opponents' 3-point shooting percentage away from home, allowing opponents to shoot 37.5% from distance, and they don't put any pressure on the ball. They are 301st in the country in turnovers forced per defensive play when they're away from home. Now, Iowa State is going to have a little bit of a leg up on the glass. Very befuddlingly, you've got a Rutgers team that is well outside the top 150 in terms of rebound rate. This despite the fact that Cliff Amarui has been tremendous down low. 10.5 points, 8.5 boards, 3 blocks per contest, but that's how you really don't have anyone else on the roster that gives you north of 4.6 boards per contest. You've had Muat Mogby in and out of the fold. That has been hurting this team quite a bit, but you do take a look at the flip side for Iowa State, and you do have a pair of guys in Felix Apara along with Zed Key who have been able to do a solid job being able to give this team a combined about 10.5 rebounds per game. Apara is able to give you about 2.5 blocks per contest, and to the credit of Iowa State, they keep things relatively clean. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. You've got Bruce Thornton who gives you 16 points, flows good offense, but he really doesn't shoot it well from 3. And take a look at this Iowa State unit. Among their top 8 scorers, you've only got one guy that shoots above 33.3% from 3. That'd be Jamison Battle at 43.5% from the outside. And I do think that Rutgers is going to do a nice job turning up the heat on this team. Rutgers, 11th in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis. They allow their opponents to shoot just 29.5% from 3-point range when they're at home. And Rutgers has been a dominant defense at home. Overall, top 15 team in all of college basketball. The guards points allowed on a per possession basis, but this ascends into the top 6 when they're at home, giving up 22 points fewer per 100 possessions at home rather than in a road or neutral court venue. And we've got an Ohio State team that does give up 11 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. It has been a rough go of it for Rutgers all season long on offense, but I do think that the defense bears down in this spot. I do think that they get the job done against Ohio State. So my DK Network right to pick, that is going to be on Rutgers on this pick'em line. And with this total, I did set it out at 132.5. I think that this is going to be a bogged down, grimy game. You've got an Ohio State team that ever since Mr. Diebler has taken over for this team, it's not like they've been super slow. It's not like they've been like super fast or anything like that. They're a relatively mid-tempo team, but overall for the season, 277th in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game. And Rutgers, they always seem to play a slow, grimy pace, about 176th in terms of total possessions per game. So looking at the under and my write-up, that is going to be on Rutgers on this pick'em line. 807, 808 on the betting board. UAB is going to be playing against SMU. SMU is a 1 to 1.5 point underdog, and total on this game is between 152.5 and 153.5. I did say UAB as an underdog of 2 points. So I'm going to be taking a look at SMU right on the money line. For SMU, the defense has not been what it was towards the beginning part of the season. I believe they have given up 70 plus points in all but one of their games since the beginning of the month of February. But SMU is still a bunch that ranks 28th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Still a top 40 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now, that's not going to do as much in this game because UAB just really hasn't been taking a lot of threes. They've been trying to really maximize on the boards. You've got Yaxel Lenborg, who's been able to give you 14 points, 10.5 boards. UAB, a top 40 team in all of college basketball. In terms of percentage of missed shots, they do result in an offensive rebound, and frankly, UAB has been abandoning their 3-point shooting because they only shoot 32% as collective from 3-point range. So, along with Lenborg, you've got 4 other guys that give you between 10 and 12.6 points per contest. Eric Gaines, along with Ephraim Johnson, don't call his name, Alejandro Vasquez, and Javion Davis. So they've been able to do a relatively solid job with that respect, but you do have an SMU team that is also a top 55 team in terms of their rebound rate. Samuel Williamson is giving you 7.5 rebounds per game, and SMU, likewise, they don't have a lot of 3-point shooting. Out of their top 4 scorers, you've got one guy that shoots, and I'm not even kidding here, north of 22% from 3-point range. That'd be Chuck Harris, who's been able to supply the team with 13 points, 3.5 assists per contest. Reek Phelps does a nice job of being able to get you buckets, being able to generate a few steals, but he shoots 22% from 3, 39% from the floor, though. You've been able to get a little bit more out of Ricardo Wright, shooting 39% from 3-point range. You've been able to get quite a bit of facilitation just all across the map from this team, as BJ Edwards is currently giving you about 3 assists per contest despite not being too much of a scorer. And I do think that with the way that SMU is able to really do a nice job of just locking things down from the perimeter, being a top 55 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they're going to slow down a Blazers team that truly has been all over the place recently. But I mean, the defense, it's not like it's been horrible. They've given up 74 points or fewer in 3 out of their last 4 games. They played that harebrained game against Memphis, and that was a lone outlier. Meanwhile, you've got an SMU team that has been struggling a little bit with their offense. 73 points or fewer scored in now each of their last 4 games in regulation. So, circumstance where I did set my total 152. I'm looking at the under. I do think that SMU wins from within, and I do think that they just have a little bit more in the backcourt to be able to get it done and a few more options. I'd like SMU outright on the money line and this total under 809, 810 on the betting board. It is UTSA. Meet me for the Roadrunners. They play us at Temple. Give our own to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls, as Temple is a 3.5 to a 4-point underdog. Totals between 152.5 and 153.5. As of right now, they're not thinking there's any, shall we say, tomfoolery going on with this Temple line. But that said, I said UTSA is only a 2-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Temple. Temple, a bad effort against UAB. We shall know what happened with that in the coming weeks. I'll let you decide what to make out of that. But what I do know is that you're going to have Isaiah Miller in this game for Temple, and he's been terrific. 15.5 points, 4 assists, stealing half per contest. Now, what has not been terrific for Temple has been 3-point shooting. I mean, if you think that they threw away the game a few days ago because of their 3-point shooting, well, they haven't done it all season long. They're shooting 30.5% from 3-point range. That's a bottom 50 mark in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, each of your top 4 scorers are shooting below 30% from 3-point range, and they go up against a UTSA team that, I mean, they are well outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that is where you do want to be attacking the old Roadrunners, as UTSA 334th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. I will say for Temple, when they hit the road, they actually do a really good job with their 3-point shooting defense. They allow opponents to shoot 30.5% from three-point range when they're away from home. That's a top 75 mark in all of college basketball. And you do have a UTSA team that they do let it fly from three-point range. Jordan Ivy Curry is giving you 17.5 points, shooting 38.5% from three-point range. He plays really well in tandem with Christian Tucker. These two guys combined for about 8.6 assists per contest. Tucker has been able to give you about 11 points per contest. You've got Carlton Lingard, who's been able to throw in there 9 points, about 5.5 rebounds per game. And really, neither of these teams has truly excelled on the glass. You've got a Temple bunch out of your top 5 scorers. 3 of them give you north of 5.2 rebounds per game, but despite that, Temple, in terms of their rebound rate, they're checking in outside the top 225. As a matter of fact, 274th. Meanwhile, you've got a UTSA team that, in terms of their rebound rate, they're more around about 142nd, so they've been able to build a little bit of something with having a bit of versatility from Dre Fuller, who's able to give you about 4.5 assists per contest, and for UTSA, they're a top 50 team. With regards to total possessions bring, only turned the ball over 11.5 times per contest, and for Temple, even though they have not been doing a great job with their shot making, they do turn the ball over just 10.3 times per contest as well. They do generate about 7.5 steals, so I do think that this Temple team is going to be able to remain lively against a UTSA team that, just quite frankly, it has been all gas but no breaks in a lot of their games, and both of these teams have not so great defensive metrics, but you've got a Temple team that is giving up, once again, about 4 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home, going up against a UTSA defense that's 330th in points allowed per possession. So I did set my total here at a 152. I just think that the shot making in general from Temple is just not going to be quite enough for an over in this spot, and it's a Temple team that has been playing a little bit more defense. They have given up 72 points or fewer in 3 of their last 4 games, while UTSA, they have given up 73 or fewer in each of their last 4, so diving in on the under, and anything north of 2, taking the points with Temple. 8-11, 8-12 on the betting board. It is Indiana playing against Michigan State, and Michigan State is a 3.5 point road favorite with your total 142 to 142.5. With Michigan State, I did set them as a favorite of 4 points. 3.5 is the absolute max I'm going to be willing to lay, but I am going to be willing to lay it. It's been a tumultuous season, really, for both of these teams, but I just have a little bit more faith in the outside shooting of this Michigan State team. With Michigan State, you do have that go-to scorer in Ty Walker that is able to give you 18 points per contest for a Michigan State team that does a nice job of valuing the ball. Only about 9.7 turnovers per game now. The big fear that you do have with Michigan State, the defense has been nowhere near the same when they've been away from home rather than when they've been at home. For Michigan State, 35th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so giving up 15.9 points more per 100 possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. And they go up against an Indiana unit that they just have not played defense anywhere. They are 246th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not great, to say the least. And the one place where Indiana is going to have an advantage is that they've got just so much size down low, but it hasn't necessarily resulted in Indiana absolutely owning on the glass. They're only 195th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate, and for as bad as guys like Matty Sissoko and company have been down low for Michigan State, they're more around about 148th. You've got Malik Hall, able to give you 13 points, shoots 37.5% from 3. As a matter of fact, for this Michigan State unit, all but one of their top 6 scorers are shooting at least 35.9% from 3-point range. Flip side for Indiana, you just don't have guards. Xavier Johnson coming back in the fold, that's been able to help this team out a little bit, shooting 38.5% for 3, gives you a few assists, but I mean, it's been up to Mackenzie Mbakbo, Khalil Ware, and Malik Renew. These 3 guys have done a nice job combining for about 44 points per contest. Ware and Renew combined nearly 16 rebounds, 2.5 blocks per contest, and Ware shoots 44% from 3-point range, but also in a nip and tuck game, Indiana shoots 65.8% the free throw line. Michigan State more around 70.5%. You would like to see that be a little bit higher, but I do have Michigan State and them being able to pull this game out. I did set them as a 4-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay it with them. And with Indiana, they just have no way of being able to generate perimeter offense, and I think that that's really going to kill this total. I set my total at 140, so diving in on the under end, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Michigan State. 8-13, 8-14 on the betting board. It is Illinois. They hit the road. They're facing off against Iowa, and Iowa is a home underdog of a point. Total on this game is 171. Set my total at a 170.5. 171 is my minimum buy point on the under. I remember doing a write-up for this game for the under a few weeks ago, and I've learned my lesson with Illinois, because if you look at Illinois' overall season numbers, yeah, they're not great with regards to their defense, but you wouldn't think that they're as ghastly as they truly are in terms of their defense. 134th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are giving up about 16.6 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than when they are at home. And we all know about this Iowa defense. They're 268th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. This Iowa team, they just play much more rapidly at home as well. Iowa, they speed up their tempo by about 4.5 possessions per game at home rather than in a road/neutral court venue. And this has been an Iowa team that throughout the years, they've always had relatively big home and road splits. They're 20th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they score 9.5 points more per 100 possessions at home rather than on the road, and that's actually much more even-steven than it was a season ago. Meanwhile, you've got an Illinois team that is right now averaging 3.5 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they are the nation's leading offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from home. I do think that Illinois is going to try to take a little bit more of a defense-oriented approach, though, because they do have a team that does a really good job of hitting the glass. Each of their top 4 scorers are giving you at least 4.3 rebounds per game, including Terrence Shannon, give you 21.5 points per contest. You've got a pair of guys in Coleman Hawkins, Quincy Guerrier, who've got good versatility. They're combined to shoot about 38.5% from three-point range, 23.5 points between these two gentlemen. And then on the flip side for Iowa, this is not some sort of an amazing jump shooting team. They shoot as a collective 34.5% from distance. Peyton Samford gives you 16 points, shoots 37% from the outside, but you've got sub 30% three-point shooting out Tony Perkins. Owen Freeman does a solid job down low with about 6.5 boards, 1.7 blocks, but he doesn't take any threes whatsoever. It's an Iowa team that does a really nice job taking care of the ball, only about 9.5 turnovers per game, and this Illinois team is not going to be cranking up the pressure. Illinois is one of the bottom teams in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but I do think that this is going to be a spot that, much like we saw the first time around, we're going to be able to see Illinois, in my opinion, just be a little bit of the better shot-making team, and I do think that that's going to win out, along with Illinois being able to win that rebound battle. I did set my line as a result at a 2.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Illinois, and I do think that you get just a little bit more defense here from this Illinois bunch. I recognize that both of these teams are relatively rough with regards to their defense, and Illinois, they are allowing opponents to shoot 37.9% from three-point range away from home, but I do think that their rebounding and holding Iowa to one-and-done possessions going to be just enough for the under. So looking at the under and willing to lay up to 2 with Illinois. 8-15, 8-16 on the betting board. It is Penn State, and they are going to be playing us to Maryland. Maryland is a underdog of 2 points. Your total on this game, it is 142.5. Semi-total 142. You're at the 142.5. Looking at the under. It's a Maryland team that just has not been able to shoot all season long. With Maryland, they are outside the top 325 in terms of three-point shooting percentage. Now, I will say this about Maryland. They do a nice job of locking you down on defense. Top 25 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. And when they're away from home, opponents are shooting just 27% from three-point range. That is the number 3 mark in all of college basketball. But you've got a Penn State team that ever since Kanye Cleary has left the team, they've honestly been a little bit better, in my opinion. It's been a Penn State unit that has really been embracing that Mike Rhodes style of being able to generate a whole bunch of turnovers. You've got the two guys that came over with Rhodes from VCU and Nick Kern along with Ace Baldwin really taking hold of this offense. They're combining for about 22.5 points per contest. Baldwin chips in there 2.8 steals per contest. That's a top 5 mark in all of college basketball. And even though this Penn State team is going to get completely outgunned on the glass, Penn State outside the top 3 with regards to rebound rate, only guy in the roster that gives you north of 4 rebounds per game. That would be Qudus Wahab, who's been able to give you 7.5 rebounds per game. Flip side, you've got Julian Reese, who's able to give you 10 rebounds per game. It's been a relatively okay season for Dante Scott, though I was expecting a little bit more out of him. Personally, it is a Maryland squad that they just can't get offense outside of Jameer Young. I love Jameer Young's game. He's been able to supply 21 points, 4.5 boards, 4.2 assists. He shoots 34% from three-point range, but what's going to be happening outside of him? This is a Maryland team that just flat out can't really develop really good offense outside of him. You've got Dante Scott, who shoots 34% from 3. Those are the only 2 guys on the roster that average more than 4.6 points per game that shoot above, and I'm not even kidding here, 18.5% from three-point range. And with regards to this Maryland team, they're just playing a whole bunch of rock fights right now, so they're just not able to develop any good, clean offense. I do think the Penn State squad that has been able to get to at least 70 points in every one of their games without Kanye Cleary. Savannah defense has been giving it up. They have given up at least 74 points in every game without him as well. I do think that their just style of being able to generate a bunch of turnovers, I think that just the newfound life that they've had, honestly, without their top scorer is going to be able to take a hold in this one. I did set Penn State as a 2-point favorite. I'm seeing a few 1.5s popping up there, and at a 1.5, I'm going to be willing to lay this number, and with this total, you're at the 142.5, I'm willing to dive under. Now we hit the Coastal Athletic Association quarterfinals. This is out there in Washington, D.C., 8-17, 8-18 on the betting board. Charleston and Monmouth do battle, and Charleston is an 8.5-point favorite on the opener. Total is 156.5. Set my line at 6.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Monmouth. Now for Monmouth, this team has won 1 true road game all season long, though. they've been a little bit better on a neutral court as they were able to get that win against Campbell yesterday. We saw them in that invitational in, I believe, the Palestra earlier in the season where they were able to pull out a few wins as well, so not as concerned about them here. And for Charleston, this is a completely airbrained team that is one of those wholes greater than the sum of its parts sort of teams, as they've got 6 different guys that give you at least 8.3 points per game, with nobody giving you north of 12.7 points per contest. Rain Smith has really been that top guy, and he shoots 40% from 3, and in general, out of your top 6 scorers, you do have 4 of them that shoot at least 37.8% from 3 for Charleston. Despite being a top 75 team in terms of total possessions per game, they do turn the ball over only about 9.9 times per contest, so they've done a relatively solid job on that front, but they're not the same team at being able to generate steals as they were a season ago. And what really led to a lot of Charleston's success last season was them being a top 50 defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They just haven't been that this year. They are 177th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, going up against a Monmouth team that does like to bomb it from 3-point range. And Charleston as a whole, they're about 176th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They do go up against a Monmouth unit that is more around 210th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Monmouth is not going to be lighting the world on fire on the glass. They're about 257th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate, but Nikita Norakovsky along with Jack Collins have been able to give you a combined about 14 rebounds per game, and you've got the best scorer out there on the floor in Xander Rice, who's been able to supply 20.5 points, 3.5 assists, shoots 36% from 3-point for a Monmouth team that does a good job of being able to run clean offense. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest in a pressure spot. You've also got a few ancillary pieces that are able to shoot it well from 3-point range, as Abdi Bashir Jr. has been able to shoot north of 40% from 3-point range. Jared Valencia, he's been able to shoot north of 41% from 3-point range. These two guys have been able to combine for about 14 points per contest. They don't have quite the depth that Charleston does, and Charleston plays a unique style where they play with their hair on fire and everything like that, but it is a Charleston unit that I do feel like there's a little bit of volatility with their style. They've been playing much better with their defense recently, having given up 73 points or fewer in 4 of their last 5 games, but you've got a Monmouth team that on any given night, they're able to give you 80 plus. As a matter of fact, you take a look at what this Monmouth team has done. They have gotten past the 80-point plateau in 4 of their last 6 games, so I do think that this is going to be a rather up and down sort of game. I think we went a little bit too far with this total. I set mine at a 154.5. Monmouth is a relatively mid-tempo team, and Charleston is improving a little bit with that defense, so looking at the under, but with Charleston, going to make them a 6-point favorite, so taking the 8.5 here with Monmouth and this total under. 819, 820 on the betting board, it is Towson, and they're going to be playing against UNC Wilmington. Opener on this one is Wilmington, a 3.5-point favorite with a total of 131.5. I set Towson as a 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to ride with them outright on the money line. This Towson unit has been able to do a really nice job of just D'ing up and being able to hit the glass. Towson, a top 35 unit in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. Charles Thompson is going to be able to win the battle on the glass. He's able to give this Towson team 8.5 rebounds per game. And for Towson, the offense, it certainly has been a work in progress, and you do have trepidation with them. They shoot just 65% the free throw line, so in a late game spot, that does hurt. But Nenda Turk has been able to give this team a nice sign of life on offense. He's been able to supply the team with about 10 points per contest. Not an amazing 3-point shooter at about 30%, and all in all, Towson does shoot only about 32.5% from 3-point range. But the UNC Wilmington defense being outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and truly just not guarding the arc as well, 280th in the country in an opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that that's going to play to the advantage of Towson, and Towson, when they've been away from home, they have guarded that arc. 31.3% from 3-point range is what they allow opponents to shoot now. Wilmington sets up really good and clean offense. Wilmington, a top 5 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. You've got a whole bunch of guys that are able to bomb it from 3-point range, so they did lose one of those guys in Nick Farrar, who was shooting about 45.5% from 3-point range. Tarzarian White is going to be the best go-to scorer in this game, 19.5 points, 7 boards per contest. But with UNC Wilmington, their just inability to really guard. Other than Tarzarian White, you don't have a lot down low. He gives you 7 rebounds per game, and nobody else on this UNC Wilmington team is able to give you north of 4 boards per contest. I do think that's going to be a little bit tough for them. Wilmington just 204th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. Last time these two teams played, that was a matter of days ago. Wilmington did get the job done 75-64. That was a game on their home floor where they shot 6 of 14 from 3. Towson Towson went just 5 of 20 from distance, and Towson in that game had 19 turnovers. Towson is the team that is more prone to giving up turnovers, but Towson also won that rebound battle by 15. I think that Towson could be able to clean up a few of those turnovers and be able to serve up a little bit of revenge. So I did set Towson as the 1-point favorite. I like them outright on the money line, and I do think that we went a little bit too low for this total. Fully recognize that both of these teams are outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game, and in the case of Towson, they're outside the top 300, but Towson has been able to get a little bit more offense going. I'm not saying that it's been amazing or anything like that, but they've been able to get past the 64-point plateau in each of their last 3 games. They've been able to get past that in 4 out of their last 5, and for UNC Wilmington, they just have been giving up the points all season long. They have now given up at least 69 points in 4 out of their last 6 games. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be looking at Towson outright on the money line. 821, 822 on the betting board. We've got no numbers up for this one, as it is Drexel going up against Stony Brook. I've got my handicap here as I made Drexel a 5-point favorite and made my total at 139. A 138.5 or less. Looking at the over, 139.5 or higher. Going to be taking a look at the under, and want to lay up to 4.5 with Drexel, 5.5 or more. I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Stony Brook, and we're going to have quite a few off-the-board games here towards the back half, just because a lot of these games were based on who won yesterday, and some books, especially with the later games, they just can't get up an opening number. But that said, with this Drexel team, I do feel like they should be a bit of a favorite, because this team is going to be able to dominate on the glass. You've got a Stony Brook team as outside the top 200 with regards to rebound rate. Meanwhile, that has been the bread and butter of this Drexel team. Drexel is 10th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. Amari Williams has done an incredible job, giving you about 11 points, 9 rebounds per contest, but it's a Drexel offense that has really come and gone. Like, one night they're going to give you 75, the next night they're going to give you like 50. There's really not a lot of rhyme or reason with this team. Meanwhile, Stony Brook has been one of your best cover teams in all of college basketball, and it's a pretty well-rounded team, as Stony Brook, they don't turn the ball over a lot, 10.3 turnovers per game. They shoot 35% from three-point range. Tyler Stevenson Moore has been able to give you about 16 points per contest. They've got some stretchability with Keenan Fitzmaurice, who's able to give you about 11 points, 4.5 boards. Not a guy that's amazing with his three-point shooting, but at 7 feet tall, he's able to pop it from three-point range, and I just like the way that Stony Brook in general does a nice job of taking care of the ball, and they go up against a Drexel team that, while they play good, tough, tenacious defense, they're not a team that's necessarily going to get up in your grill, and they're not necessarily going to be forcing the issue on you too much. It has been a Drexel team that, even though the offense has been able to ascend a little bit, the defense has still been good. They've given up 70 points or fewer in now 5 out of their last 6 games. With the last time these two teams played, both teams got well past the 75-point plateau, and I do think that we're going to see the Stony Brook team do a relatively solid job of being able to hold in there with their outside shooting against a Drexel team that, in their own right, they've been a much better three-point shooting defense than the Stony Brook team. With Stony Brook, they are 227th in all of college basketball. The guards' bonus three-point shooting percentage that goes north of 38% away from home, but in a neutral court, I do think that that's going to bog down the scoring a little bit more of this Drexel team. Meanwhile, Drexel, away from home, they allow opponents to shoot about 33% from three. For Drexel, Justin Moore has given you more with about 12.5 points, 3 assists per contest, and it's a Drexel unit that they turn the ball over about 11 times per contest. With their tempo, that's relatively solid. Mado Koros has been able to shoot 40% from three-point range along with Lucas Monroe, but I do feel like Stony Brook has a little bit more depth, but Drexel does a better job on the glass. I do think that this could be a game that comes down to late game fouling, especially with a Stony Brook team that comes in very hot with their offense. The Stony Brook team, they've been able to get to at least 75 points in each of their last 5 games. So 138.5 or less, looking at the over, 139.5 prior to the under, 4.5 or less, willing to lay with Drexel, and then 5.5 or more. I'm going to be taking a look at those points with Stony Brook. 823, 824 on the betting board. Another game without numbers, as it's Delaware and Hofstra doing battle from our nation's capital. I set my line to where I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with Hofstra, 4.5 or more. I'm going to be taking a look at Delaware with total of 142, 141.5 or less. Looking at the over, 142.5 or higher. I'm going to be diving in on this total under with Delaware. It's been a up and down team, to say the least, that really doesn't have a lot of strengths, but also really doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. They're a relatively middle-of-the-road team when it comes to hitting the glass. I do like what Christian Ray is able to provide for them, as he's been able to give the team 8.5 rebounds per game. That is going to be the big advantage for Delaware, even though they're not an amazing rebounding team. Hofstra is checking in about 300th in the country with regards to rebound rate. They've got their 2 star players in Tyler Thomas, Charleston Dunbar. They've been able to combine for 40.5 points per contest, 12 boards between the two of them. You've got Thomas doling out 3.5 assists on 37.5% three-point shooting, and Dunbar, he shoots 40% from three-point range. You've also had Jaquan Carlos give you 35% from three-point range, and he's a 6.5 assists per game guy. He's been doing a nice job being able to really run this offense, but outside those 3 guys, nobody else really gives you north of 7 points per contest. You've got a thin rotation. Delaware, they do have more depth. They do have that go-to scorer in Jair Davis, who's able to give you 17.5 points per contest, but then you've got 5 other players outside that give you between 13.5 and 8.2 points per game. Only one of those guys gives you double figures, and Gerald Drumgoole gives you 13.5 points per contest, but having someone like a Calvin Riley that pops threes at a 37.5% clip, gives you 9 points per game, that should be able to keep this team relatively lively, and it is a Delaware unit that does a nice job of taking care of the ball. They only turn the ball over about 10.5 times per contest. Hofstra, they turn the ball over 10.6 times per contest as well, so both of these teams do a relatively solid job on that front end. Really, neither of these teams are generating a lot of turnovers, so it's pretty even Steven on that front, but it's all going to come down to, can Delaware guard the perimeter? Hofstra is looking to make their living from three-point range, and Hofstra, it's a bunch of, they allow opponents to shoot 34.6% from three-point range. That is 234th in all of college basketball. The Delaware team, 70th in all of college basketball. They allow opponents to shoot just 32.7% from the outside. Lone time these two teams played, Hofstra won that game by 5 at home. I do think that this is going to be a little bit more of a nip and tuck game here, and I do think that in the end, Hofstra, a team that has really gotten it going with their defense. They enter into this tournament having allowed 64 points or fewer for their last 5 games. Going to be able to do a relatively solid job, but you've also got a Delaware team that is really starting to cook as well. They've gotten to at least 70 points in 3 out of their last 5 games. So, circumstance where a 141.5 or less, looking at the over, 142.5 or higher, going to be taking a look at the under, and I'm willing to lay up to 3.5 with Hofstra 4.5 or more, taking those points with Delaware. 825, 826 on the betting board. Indiana State and Drake are doing battle. This is from the Enterprise Center for the Missouri Valley Conference title, and this is a game of which we've got no numbers up, but I've got my line. I'm willing to lay up to 3 with Indiana State, 4 or more. It's a take for me on Drake. With this Drake Bulldogs team, it's been a bunch that has been able to do a very solid job of just being well-rounded, and really both of these teams are. Indiana State is certainly much more of an offensive-based team. They're a top 25 team in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, but they're still a top 100 defense in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. Drake doesn't have that demonstrative scoring to make them like a top 20 team or anything like that in terms of points scored on a per-possession basis, but do feel like they're just a skoge better on defense. With Drake, in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, they're checking in 70th in all of college basketball, but I do think that it's going to be hard for Darnell Brody to match up with Robbie Avila. Mr. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar himself, 17.5 points, 7 boards, 4 assists. I mean, he's just an absolute stat sheet for now. Both of these teams are going to have to deal with the fact that this is not a good shooter's eye out there in this arena, but I mean, you did see Indiana State yesterday really bust through for a 94-point performance. Drake, they don't play as up-tempo. The 72 points, I would consider that to be pretty good in this venue. And you've got Tucker DeVries, guy that's able to take over a game for this Drake bunch. He registers 21.5 points, 7 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. I mean, he does a little bit of everything for this team, but it's all about, can you get some ancillary production? Can you get some like an Aiden Wright, like you did yesterday with 20 points, to be able to supply that? You've been able to have a pair of guys in Cooper Garland and Connor Enright combined for about 5.5 assists per contest. Neither of these guys are really super scorers, but they're able to do a good job on that front because Indiana State, they've got many ways of being able to beat you, as you've got Avila who gives you 4 assists per contest, but then you've got 4 other guys that give you at least 2.2 assists per game. Xavier Bledson, Julian Larry, they combine to be able to give you about 7.5 assists per game, with Larry chipping in there a steal and a half per contest. It's an Indiana State team that does shoot 38.5% from three-point range, and it's a Drake unit that, away from home, they do allow opponents to shoot 35.8% from three-point range. Indiana State, they give up their looks as well. Indiana State, about 81st in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but that does rise up to about 33.3% in a road/neutral venue. But I do think that with Indiana State being a very well-traveled team, a team that's been able to hit threes at home, on the road, what have you, and going up against a Drake team that it just feels like it sort of comes and goes with them, and other than Darnell Brody, you don't necessarily have a ton down low that Indiana State should be able to pull this one out, and I did shave down my total way back more than I typically would. This would be a game that, under normal circumstances, the total would be right around about a 160, but in this circumstance, given that both of these teams played yesterday, given the venue, 149 or less, I'm looking at the over. 150 or higher, I'm going to be diving in on the under. 827, 828 on the betting board. Furman is going to be playing against Samford, and this is from Asheville, North Carolina. You've got no numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I said Samford as a favorite of 6 points and a total of 160, so 5.5 or less. Want to lay with Sam Amford, 6.5 or more. Stake for me on Furman, 159.5 or less. Want to be over 160 or higher. I'm going to be looking at the under with Samford. This team just plays at a harebrained, frenetic pace, and this team has just been able to rack up points upon points all season long. Did play a little bit of a slow slog yesterday against Mercer, won that game by kind of 70-57. I do think that things are going to be cranked up tempo much more against a Furman team that year in and year out there in the upper half of all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, and just simply a Furman team that doesn't necessarily do the world's greatest job on defense. Well outside the top 200 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Furman, away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 34.8% from three-point range, and Samford has been one of the best three-point shooting teams in all of college basketball, a top 15 team, as a matter of fact, in terms of their three-point shooting percentages. They are just so well-rounded with so many guys. They're able to just pump it in there from three-point range. Their main guy in terms of being able to facilitate has been really good at Rylan Jones, who's been able to give you about 5 assists per contest, and there's just so many different guys that he's able to look to and able to get them open, as you've got out of your top 6 scorers, all of them shooting at least 35.9% from 3, and all but one of them in Mr. Jermaine Marshall, who's out of the fold for seemingly half the year, shooting at least 38.5% from three-point range. A.J. Sam McCray has been able to shoot about 42.5% from 3 with 12.5 points per contest. Jaden Campbell shoots 47% from three-point range. Anchor gives you 6 rebounds per game. So Samford very good on that front. Now, to be able to knock off this Samford team, you're going to need to make their three. Samford is well outside the top 260 in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, but also with this Samford team, for a team that plays incredibly airbrained, they're not too bad on the glass. They're about 186th in all of college basketball with regards to rebound rate. They go up against a Furman unit that's a little bit better at 123rd, but for Furman, you really don't have anyone other than Marcus Foster that's able to give you north of 5 rebounds per contest, as Foster has been a do-it-all sort of player. 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, was missing for a little bit of time during the season. He's only shooting about 31% from three-point range, and for Furman as a whole, they only shoot 32% from the outside. You've got 2 guys on the roster that really have been consistently out there that are shooting above 35.2% from three-point range, and one of those guys just came back from injury, and Alex Williams, he's been a little bit, shall we say, touch and go with regards to just his status all season long. Carter Witt, I was expecting a bit more from 3.5 assists, but only about 7.5 points per contest. Turns the ball over a little bit more than you'd like. Furman, overall for the season, they've been turning the ball over about 12 times per contest, and last time these two teams played, it was a little bit of a lower scoring game at 74-72, but these two teams combined to go 18 of 57 from three-point range. I do think that things are going to be a little bit warmer on this front, and I do think that Samford going to be able to generate a few more turnovers. So we'll delay up to 5.5 here with Samford, 6.5 for more to get the points with Furman, then 159.5 for less. Looking at the over, 160.5 for higher, the under. 8:29, 8:30 on the betting board. This is a game that is off the board as we are out there in the great state of North Carolina for East Tennessee State and Chattanooga. Both of these teams won yesterday to be able to reach this spot, but I said Chattanooga is a 5.5 point favorite and made this total 143.5. So 143 or less, looking at the over, 144 or higher to the under, and one to lay up to 5 with Chattanooga, 6 or more. That's going to be a take for me on East Tennessee State, and East Tennessee State has done a relatively solid job of being able to hit the glass, and they should have a little bit of a leg up on Chattanooga here, but both of these teams are relatively close to about that 150 mark in terms of their rebound rate, as Chattanooga, even though they don't have as many rebounding options as East Tennessee State, out of your top 5 scores for East Tennessee State, you've got 4 of them and are able to give you at least 4 rebounds per contest. But with the Chattanooga unit, I do like what Sam Alexis has been able to supply the team. Down low, 12 points, 9 plus rebounds per game, and then you've got that duo of Trey Bonham along with Honor Off. They were only able to score 22 points yesterday and still were able to knock off Wofford by double figures. That shows you the versatility and the scoring that you've got with the Chattanooga team. But I mean, these two guys as a whole, they're averaging about 32.5 points per contest, entered in yesterday, both shooting north of 82% of the free throw line, both shooting north of 38.5% from three-point range, and that's a big thing for this Chattanooga team. Their top 6 scorers, all but one of them, and Alexis, shoots at least 76.4% at the free throw line, so if you get in a nip-and-tuck situation, that's good to be able to help them out. Meanwhile, you've got an ETSU team that they shoot less than 31% from three-point range. Chattanooga, year in and year out, they're typically relatively rough with their three-point shooting defense. It's been a little bit better this year, but still, they're allowing opponents to shoot 36.2% away from home from three-point range, but just don't have a lot of options here. E.B. Asamoah has done a nice job giving you about 15 points per contest, and then from there, you've got Jaden Seymour, Jaden Parker, along Karen Boyd, who've all been able to give you at least 6 rebounds per contest. Parker, your high watermark guy with 6.8 boards, 2.2 blocks per contest, so you've got an ETSU team that does a solid job down low, but they also do turn the ball over about 12 times per contest, and they rely upon a Peterson and Kamari Peterson to do all the offense, and he's been relatively solid in terms of giving you 4 assists, 1.7 steals per contest, but again, not really a threat to pop it from three-point range. That's really where you want to be attacking the Chattanooga team, and for ETSU, they've been a team that in terms of their three-point shooting defense has been a little bit lax as well, allowing opponents away from home to shoot 35% from 3-point range. You've seen these two teams match up quite a bit, and with these two teams, when they've matched up, it's been relatively high-scoring exposés, as ETSU has been able to get it going a little bit more with their offense recently. ETSU has now been able to get past the 71-point plateau in 5 out of their last 6 games. It is a Chattanooga team that has been a little bit hot and cold in terms of their offense, but now they've reached at least 75-3 out of their last 5 games, and last time these two teams matched up for ETSU, they were able to get to 71 in that game. Chattanooga won that game 84-71. So, Sacramento Saints were willing to lay up to 5 with Chattanooga, 6 or more taking the points with ETSU, and then 143 or less, looking over 144 higher to the under. 831, 832 on the betting board. It is Appalachian St and Arkansas State doing battle, and we do have an opener for this one out there in Pensacola, Florida, as Appalachian State just find themselves as a favorite of 5 points, in your total on this game is 146.5 with App State. I did set them as a 5-point favorite. We're doing this just as we got an initial DraftKings opener, so at the 5, it's a little bit of a wait and see for me. 4.5 or less, willing to lay with Appalachian State. 5.5 or more, taking the points with Arkansas State, and this would be a circumstance where I'd be looking at the under, semi-total 145, and big reason why I'm taking a look at the under is that you've got an Arkansas State team that plays vastly different with their offense at home rather than on the road. Arkansas State is shooting north of 42% from 3-point range at home, sub 31% away from home, and for this Arkansas State team, their points scored on a per possession basis, it drops significantly away from home, north of 22 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and they go up against an Appalachian State team that they themselves shoot about 37.5% from 3-point range at home. That falls off to about 31.5% away from home, and stunningly with this bunch in Appalachian State, they're actually now a top 125 team in terms of total possessions per game, but I mean, they're very much built around the low post. Appalachian State, a top 5 team in all of college basketball in percentage of opponent shots that they're able to block, as they've got a pair of guys down low, and Justin Abson along Trevon Spillers. They combine for about 4.2 blocks per contest. Abson is able to give you 7 boards, 8 points per contest. Spillers, your main guy, with 13 points, 9 rebounds for an Appalachian State team that does shoot 34% from 3, and they do a nice job taking care of the ball with only about 10.5 turnovers per game, but they do shoot 67% of the free throw line. Donovan Gregory has shot it north of 40% from 3, 14 points per contest. Well, for Arkansas State, you've got essentially 6 different guys. They're able to give you at least 9 points per contest. They were dealing with a little bit of injury to Freddie Hicks, and boy, has he been big. He had 23 points yesterday for this team, but you really don't have that one consistent 3-point shooter outside of Mr. Built Ford Tough and Darren Ford, who's been able to shoot about 36% from 3-point range. Everyone else shoots sub 35% from distance among their top scorers. They've done a solid job, Arkansas State has, in not turning the ball over, about 11.5 turnovers per game, but I just feel like they might get neutralized once again by this Appalachian State team. Last time these two teams played, it was a true road game for Arkansas State. That was 80-57. They went 5 of 26 from 3. Appalachian State went 8 of 17, and Appalachian State actually lost a turnover battle, but they certainly won the battle down low. That is going to happen to Arkansas State once again, who's not a terrible rebounding team. This Arkansas State team, in terms of their overall rebound rate, they're within the top 125 in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, they're within the top 100 in all of college basketball. That said, you go up against an Appalachian State team that's more around 45th with this respect. I do think that that's going to be a little bit difficult for them. So I did set my line at 5, at 4.5 for less, willing to lay with Appalachian State, 5.5 for more, taking the points with Arkansas State, and here at the 146 plus IMC, we'll be looking at the under. 833, 834 on the betting board. Texas State and James Madison are going to be doing battle from old Pensacola, Florida. This is a game that's presently off the board, but I've got my handicap. I'm willing to lay up to 12.5 with James Madison, 13.5 or more, taking the points with Arkansas State, and set a total of 145, 144.5 or less, looking at the over, 145.5 or higher, looking at the under. Now, for Texas State, they've actually really been able to get it going with their offense. They have now exceeded the 70-point plateau in each of their last 5 games, and you do have Colton Benson, who's been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range, but it's still a Texas State team that's outside the top 230 with regards to points scored on a per possession basis. They got Caden Gums back in the fold for the first time in quite some time yesterday. He's been one of your main facilitators in 3.5 assists per game, so that does help out Texas State a little bit, and it's a Texas State team that it's not bad on the glass. They're a top 135 team with regards to rebound rate, but this James Madison team, while we want to talk about the offense, they're a top 40 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They've got so many nice pieces. This James Madison team, 61st in the country in terms of rebound rate, entering into yesterday, a top 25 team with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and it just feels like there's Noah's Ark. They've got darn near 2 of everything, as they've been able to get really good production all season long out of their main scorer, Terrence Edwards, who's been able to give you about 17.5 points per contest. TJ Bickerstaff down low, he's been able to do a nice job supplying this team with about 7.5 7.5 to 8 rebounds per game. But then on top of that, Julian Wooden is able to shoot about 40% from three. He's been able to give this team darn near 10 to 11 points per contest. Noah Friedel has stepped up with about 11.5 points, shooting 37.5% from three. James Madison, despite being in the top 40 in terms of total possessions per game, they only turn the ball over about 11 times per game, and they turn you over, which is a big issue for this Texas State team. Texas State turned the ball over north of 13 times per contest. Gums being back in fold should be able to help this team out a little bit, but James Madison, in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, 38th in all of college basketball entering into yesterday. I think that's going to overwhelm the Texas State team. So willing to lay up to 12.5 for James Madison, 13.5 or more. Take the points with Texas State, and with how high tempo I think this game is going to be, 144.5 or less. Looking at the over, 145.5 or higher. Looking at the under, 835, 836 on the betting board is North Dakota State and St. Thomas doing battle from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, as St. Thomas is a 5.5 to a 6-point favorite with your total 135, and since St. Thomas as a 5.5 point favorite here at the 6, I'm going to be willing to take a look at the points. Now, St. Thomas has been able to do a much better job in terms of their defense. You take a look at this North Dakota State team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 335th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, it's a St. Thomas team that they have been a slow team, but not necessarily a great defensive team up until this year, but they were really able to bust through this year. 130th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. The one thing that I think is really going to be killing them is just the glass. With St. Thomas, you don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you north of 5 rebounds per game. As a result, the St. Thomas team, in terms of their rebound rate, they're checking in about 243rd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a North Dakota State team that you'd like to see a little bit more out of Andrew Morgan. He only gives you about 4.5 to 5 boards per contest, but North Dakota State, they're checking in more around 182nd. Now, to the credit of St. Thomas, this has been a unit that when they've been at home, they've done a nice job of being able to guard the three-point line. On the road, that does go to about 33.9%. North Dakota State, they're going to give up their fair share of looks as well. With North Dakota State, they do allow opponents to shoot about 36.2, 36.3% from three-point range, and I really do like the way that this St. Thomas team values the ball. They've been, since they've come up to the D1 ranks, a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but I do think that with North Dakota State having Bowden Skunberg being a little bit of a do-it-all player, 14 points, 5.5 boards, that could be a nice elixir to what you've got for the St. Thomas team, where you've got Raheem Anthony, Parker Jorkland, who combined for 26 points, about 9.5 rebounds. These two guys combined for about 4.5 assists per contest. Anthony has been able to shoot 47.5% from three, but he's the only of the St. Thomas top 4 scorers that does shoot about 31% from three. Now, as a collective, they shoot 36.5% from three-point range. Brooks Allen has been able to shoot in the high 30s from three-point range. Carter Bajerki has been able to shoot north of 45% from three-point range, but I do think that with North Dakota State doing a nice job, being able to value the ball, only about 11 turnovers per contest, while they themselves shoot 37% from three-point range. And what has been really interesting about this North Dakota State team, just strangely, they shoot much better from three-point range away from home rather than at home. They shoot 38.5% from three-point range away from home, more like 36.7% from three-point range at home. I think that that's going to keep them lively with having guys like a Tajavius Miller being able to give you about 8.5 points per contest. He's been shooting about 40% from three-point range. Shakari White shoots 44% from the outside with about 11 points per contest. I do think that North Dakota State holds in there. So, did set my line at a 5.5 here at the 6. I'm going to be willing to take a look at the points. And this is going to be a low possession game. St. Thomas outside the top 325 in terms of total possessions per game, but I think you get just enough execution for an over. Set my total 135.5. Looking at the over and the points from North Dakota State, 837, 838 on the betting board. North Dakota is going to be playing us to Omaha. That is going to be out there in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and Omaha is a 2.5 point underdog, seeing a 2 out there as well. Total on this game is 145, and I set my line at 2.5. At the 2, I'm going to be willing to lay it with North Dakota. I just feel like North Dakota is a little bit more of a balanced team than Omaha, who has really slowed things down. Omaha well outside the top 250 with regards to total possessions per game, and they've got two nice top flight guys in Frankie Fiddler, Markel Sutton. They combine for 12.5 rebounds per game. Fiddler, 19.5 points on 36% three-point shooting. Sutton, he's been able to give you 12.5 points per contest for an Omaha team that they only turn the ball over about 9.8 times per contest, but outside those two guys, you don't have anyone else that gives you double figures. Meanwhile, Tyree Iheanacho is the most versatile player out there on the floor. 4 assists, 5 boards, 15 points, doesn't necessarily pop it well from 3, and this North Dakota team, their top 4 scorers, only one of them does shoot north of 32.1% from 3. That'd be Trayson Eaglestaff, who's been able to shoot 38% from the outside, but with this North Dakota team, I do like the fact that their defense just overall is a little bit better than that of Omaha's. Omaha proves correct the fact that just because you play slow doesn't mean that you play great defense. They're 311th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. Not that this North Dakota team is amazing by any stretch of the imagination, but away from home, they allow opponents to shoot 32.5% from 3. Not sure how, but they allow opponents to shoot darn near 40% from three-point range when they're at home. So that was a very interesting split, but for Omaha, 316th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Again, they give up fewer points per possession away from home rather than at home. For North Dakota, they're the exact same. They're 261st. They give up 2.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home as well. So some very interesting splits there. North Dakota does a good job of being able to value the ball themselves. They only give out about 10 turnovers per contest. Sonse Sarcisse has been able to give you 9 points, 5 rebounds per contest. And then you've got, in my opinion, the best rebounder in this game, Amar Kulajovic, who's been able to give you about 8.5 points, 8.5 boards per contest with North Dakota. I do think that they're going to be able to win this game from within. North Dakota, with regards to their rebound rate, they're checking in about 127th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, this Omaha unit, because they're a little bit more top-heavy, 256. So with Omaha, I did set them as a 2.5-point underdog. I'm willing to lay the deuce here. With North Dakota, I did set my total 146.5. Both of these teams well outside the top 225, actually outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. I do think that there's going to be a lot of open looks for both of these teams and late game value. So looking at the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with North Dakota. Now we head to the Big Sky tournament out there in Boise, Idaho. These two games are going to be off the board before we hit the extra games, 8:39, 8:40. It is Sacramento St playing against Eastern Washington, and with Eastern Washington, I had to make them a double-figure favorite in this one. I made them a favorite of 12 points, so I'm willing to lay up to 11.5 with them, 12.5 or more to get the points with Sacramento St, and then 145.5 or less, looking at the over, 146.5 or higher, going to be diving in on the under. Now, last time these two teams played, you go back to that, actually within the week, they played on Monday. That was a 91-88 game, but I take away from it that Sacramento St is not going to be able to duplicate the shooting that they had in that one. They went 18 of 31 from three-point range and still lost the game on their home floor. Meanwhile, Eastern Washington, a bunch has been a flamethrower all season long on offense. I will say, they do average about 21 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. They went 8 of 24 from three-point range. I do think that they're going to be a little bit more warm with that aspect. Eastern Washington all season long, 24th in the country in terms of three-point shooting percentage. That does bog down to 35.6% from three-point range away from home, more like 41% at home, but you've got so much size and versatility when it comes to Eastern Washington. 5 separate guys that give you double figures, 6 different guys that give you at least 9.6 points per contest, and among these guys, you've got all but 2 of them giving you at least 4 rebounds per game. Cedric Howard leads the way, shooting 39.5% from 3, 15 points, right around about 6.5 rebounds per game. And what's interesting about Eastern Washington is that you don't have one main facilitator, but all of your top 6 scorers give you at least 1.6 assists per game. Nobody gives you north of 2.2. It's really the unsung hero of Elias Magusin who is able to get everyone going. He only averages 3 points, but he gives you 4.6 assists per game. He is literally a designated passer for this team, going against the Sacramento St team that they've got one forte, and that's the fact that they hit the glass, and they hit the glass relatively hard. Sacramento St has been able to have Duncan Boom Boom Powell lead the way in so many different aspects for the team. He's been able to supply you with about like 12 to 13 points per contest. He gives you 6+ boards. He throws in there about 2.5 assists per game as well. This for a Sacramento St team that, in terms of their overall rebound rate, they are checking in 29th in all of college basketball, but they can't hit threes. They are in the bottom 35 in all of college basketball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and they allow opponents to shoot well north of 35% from three-point range. So you've got a bunch of issues there. Z Hermoda along with Brandon Benson, they were really your top perimeter options, but Benson went down with an injury early on during conference play. That was brutal for them. Armoda, he's only been able to shoot about 31% from three-point range, and that leaves you essentially with one guy that shoots about 32% from three-point range. That'd be Austin Patterson, who's been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest. He shot 41% from three-point range. He's been able to do a relatively solid job, but past that, you really don't have a whole lot else for the Sacramento St team. You do get about 4 boards and a little bit of three-point shooting out of Emil Skayata, who comes over from Finland. He's 6'4", but he plays a little bit bigger than that. It is an Eastern Washington team that certainly is a little bit, shall we say, lackadaisical with their defense. They're in 37th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, while outside the top 225 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. But we've also got a Sacramento State team that has been really rough with their defense. And for Eastern Washington, they're actually giving up more than 2 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than when they are at home. Sacramento State 315th in all of college basketball. And they give up a point and a half less per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. But I do think that Eastern Washington going to overwhelm Sacramento State, and I do think that the three-point shooting is going to be much cooler in this game at Sacramento State, alongside the top 275 in terms of total possessions per game. So willing to lay up to 11.5 with Eastern Washington, 12.5 or more, taking those points with Sacramento St, and then 145.5 or less, looking over 146.5 or higher to the under. And then this last game on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we hit the extra games, 841, 842, Northern Colorado and Idaho State do battle. This is a number where I set Northern Colorado as a 5-point favorite and a total of 145. So 144.5 or less, looking over 145.5 or higher. The under, I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 with Northern Colorado, 5.5 or more. Going to be taking those points with Idaho State. Idaho State is one of those teams in which they play slowly, but they don't necessarily play tremendous defense, as they are outside the top 250 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, to their credit, despite the fact that they are well outside the top 310 in terms of total possessions per game, you've got a quartet of different guys to give you at least 11.4 points per contest. Down low, Braden Parker along Kyrie Huey, they've been able to combine for about 27 points per contest, and both give you about 5.5 rebounds per game. And in the case of both of these gentlemen, they combine for about 3 blocks per game, but it's an Idaho State team that they're shooting about 33% from three-point range. I like the game of Malik Arrington, who's able to give you about 5 assists per game, but they are truly going to be up against it in St. Thomas and trying to defend him, as St. Thomas has been one of the most versatile players in the country. 20 points, 7 boards, 4 assists, shoots 33% from 3-point, steal and a half per contest. He is the engine that makes this thing run, and last time these two teams played, that was about a week ago, he had 20 points, 12 boards, 8 assists. I mean, he very nearly went off for a triple-double. That was an 81-79 road win for Northern Colorado, and for Northern Colorado, they're getting him a little bit more help, as you've got Brock Wisney along with Jaron Riley, who have been able to combine for about 23 points per contest. Riley gives you 5 assists per game, and Northern Colorado, they're an up-tempo team, top 100 team with regards to total possessions per game, yet they have the same amount of turnovers per game as Idaho State, making them a bit more efficient on that front. DeJour Reeves has been able to chip in there at 37.5% three-point shooting and supplying the team with about 14.5 points per contest. He's been nice in the backcourt. Now, Northern Colorado, they do not guard a soul from three-point share. Outside the top 275 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, but Idaho State also 306th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. This is the Northern Colorado team that loves to shoot it from three-point range. They shoot about 35.5% from three-point range. You've got a 44.5% outside shooter in Zach Block, who I think could be a little bit of an X factor. Last time these two teams played, he had just 6 points. I think that he could be able to ascend off of that. So I do think that Northern Colorado, much like they did when these two teams played over the weekend, gets the job done. I'm willing to lay up to 4.5 here with Northern Colorado, 5.5 or more, take the points with Idaho State, and then 144.5 or less, looking over, and 145.5 or higher. The under. Now let's hit the extra games.
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
306-501, 306-502. It is Longwood and UNC Asheville. They are going to be doing battle for the Big South Final. This is a true neutral court game for them because the host of this was supposed to be High Point, who turned out to be a low point, but that said, opener has UNC Asheville as a 3-point favorite and a total of 144, and I said Asheville's 4.5-point favorite. I am going to be willing to lay this 3. Drew Pember is going to be the best player out there on the floor. Drew Pember has been absolutely amazing this year. He's truly 6'10", 6'11". He's able to shoot threes at a north of 35% clip, gives you 2+ blocks, 7 rebounds, 20 points per game. This guy is the real deal. On the flip side, you do have a Longwood team that has been one of the better rebound teams in all of college basketball, though I will say this, they are outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, so while Longwood is a relatively good defense, and they are number 13 in all of college basketball with regards to their rebound rate, UNC Asheville is outside the top 200. You do want to have a little bit of buyer beware there, and this is a Longwood team that overall, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, it does slide away from them, a little bit away from home, giving up about 6.5 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And while UNC Asheville, not quite the same team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're about 219th in this category. They do a nice job guarding the arc, top 75 team in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage. Going up against a Longwood unit that, on the glass, you've got Jonathan Massey, Simon Zapala, along with Michael Christmas, who have been able to combine for in that neighborhood about 16.5 rebounds per game. Christmas does shoot 39% per 3 with his 11.5 points per contest, and you've got a nice go-to scorer in Waylon Napper, who gives you 15 points, 4.3 assists per contest. The one thing Napper doesn't do is pop it from three-point range, and this Longwood team does turn the ball over about 12.5 times per contest. UNC Asheville, I think, is going to have the best point guard in this game, and typically that wins out. Caleb Burgess, he only gives you 7 points, but 5 assists to 2.5 turnovers per game. This for a core that shoots 37% from three-point range, and out of your top 4 scorers for Asheville, they all shoot at least 37% from three-point range. Fletcher Abey, coupled with Josh Banks, they combine for about 23.5 points and north of 40% three-point shooting. I think that'll be just enough for UNC Asheville to be able to get the job done, and I do think that this is going to become a little bit more of an up-and-down game for Longwood. Their defense really did have a little bit of a tough time towards the back half of the season, and this is a Longwood unit that comes in having given up at least 72 points in 4 out of their last 5 games, and as a matter of fact, 5 out of their last 6 games. And last time these two teams played, both teams got to 75. That was a game that Longwood won 80-75, but they needed Asheville to go 8 of 27 from 3, while they went 13 of 28 from 3. I think that irons out here. So looking at the over semi-total, 144.5, and 1 to lay up to 4 with Asheville. 306-503, 306-504. This is the final for the Atlantic Sun. Stetson is going to be at home against Austin Peay. Austin Peay, a 3.5 point underdog. Totals between 146 and 146.5 with Stetson. I made them a 3.5 point favorite. So here on the 3.5, it's a little bit more of a wait and see mode for me. If we could get down to a 3, I'd be willing to lay it with Stetson. 4 more, I'm going to be taking those points with Austin Peay. Austin Peay has scored at least 74 points in every one of their games since the beginning of the month of February. This was one of the most low and slow teams in all of college basketball, but they've really cranked things up, and that's a big reason why I set my total at 149.5. I'm looking at the over. Now, with Stetson, this team is in the bottom 75 in all of college basketball in terms of total possessions per game, but this is a Stetson team that they're sort of a make it and take it sort of team. They shoot as a collective about 36.5% from three-point range. This team is very effective with their three-point shooting when they're at home, but they're also pretty ghastly with regards to giving up the three-point arc as well. So I do think that you're going to have yourself a low possession game that's going to be very high on just overall execution. As for Stetson, they do have a 20-plus point per game scorer in Jalen Blackman, who's able to give you about 20.5 points per contest. Stephon Swenson does a nice job flowing clean offense. Stetson has only turned the ball over 10.3 times per contest. Swenson has been able to give you 5.9 assists, 13.5 points per game. And Open Gasterse down low, he's able to give you about 7 rebounds per game. But DeMarcus Sharp, he has been living up to his name for this Austin Peay team. He was out throughout much of the month of February for this Austin Peay unit, which did give them sort of this little bit more of an up-tempo style and this high-scoring style that they've been forming recently. And he does it all for this team. 17 points, 6.5 boards, 4.5 assists, 2 steals per contest. He actually led all of college basketball in terms of three-point shooting percentage last year, north of 54%. That's down to 6.7% this season, but he hasn't needed to pop threes because you've got Desi Jones, along Jamonte Black, combining for 27 points on about 38.5% three-point shooting. It is a Austin Peay team that's outside the top 250 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis themselves, but they only turn the ball over about 8.8 times per contest. One of the best teams at being able to make the most of their low amount of possessions as well. And for this Austin Peay team, they do a nice job of being able to guard the three-point line as well. They're about 173rd in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, allowing teams to shoot just 33% from three-point range when they're away from home. Meanwhile, this Stetson unit, they do allow opponents to shoot just 33.5% from three-point range at home as well, but I do think that for Gasterse, he's going to be the best overall rebounder in this game. I think Austin Peay is a little bit more well-rounded in the end. I do think that Stetson gets the job done on their home floor, but can't lay anything more than 3. At a 4 or more, it's a take for me on Austin Peay. 3 or less, going to be willing to lay with Stetson, and did some I told 149.5 with the way that both of these teams have been executing on offense recently. So looking at the over, and at 3 or less, willing to lay with Stetson. 306-505, 306-506. Bucknell, it's a road face-off against Colgate. Colgate, an 11-point favorite. Total on this game is anywhere between 131.5 and 132, and with Colgate, I did make them a 12.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Bucknell has been able to make a lot of improvement throughout the season, but I don't know if it's enough against a Colgate bunch that it's not quite the same three-point shooting team that they have been in past years. Typically, Colgate is a top 10 team in terms of their overall three-point shooting percentage, and they're still good. They're still shooting about 36% from three-point range, but this has truly been a dominant defense. Colgate, 27th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and if you look at just their home numbers, they're a top 15 team in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, with a well-rounded gentleman in Braden Smith that does it all. 6 assists, 5.3 rebounds, 2 steals, gives you 12 points per contest. Now, he and Keegan Records, your top 2 scorers, both shoot below 32% from three-point range, but you've got so many guys like Ryan Moffitt, Brady Cummings that combine to shoot about 39% from three-point range. These 2 guys have been able to supply you with about 18.5 points per contest. Down low, you've been able to get a little bit of rebounding out of Jeff Woodward, who's been able to give you about 4 boards per contest. He's been able to come into his own with double figures in 3 out of the last 4 games. And for Bucknell, you have to fear that this team is just a little bit too top-heavy, with Jack Forrest being a nice do-it-all scorer with about 16 points, 5.5 boards, a steal, shoots 37.5% for 3. And Noah Williamson is a true 7-footer that gives you a block, 6 boards, 12 points per game. And then Alvin Edmonds has been your main guy, giving you 4.5 assists, 1.5 steals per contest. But what else are you going to get outside that? Bucknell is shooting about 33.5% from three-point range. And I will say this about Bucknell. This team has actually been a little bit better with their defense when they've been away from home rather than when they've been at home, especially their perimeter defense. Opponents are just shooting 32% from three-point range in a road or neutral court environment against them, but I do fear that Bucknell is just really going to be up against it, against a Colgate team that has been in their own right also one of the best perimeter defenses in all of college basketball. Colgate is allowing teams to shoot just 30.3% from three-point range. That is 11th in all of college basketball, and I do think that Bucknell, a team that has been well outside the top 225 in terms of total possessions per game and really lacking on the boards, this Colgate team can be at a little bit more down low, as Colgate, in terms of their rebound rate, they are checking in more around about 95th in all of college basketball, but Bucknell being 233rd, I think that that's going to be a little bit too much of a mountain for them to be able to climb in. Last time these two teams squared off, this was on the home floor of Colgate, much like this game is going to be. Bucknell, they took it on the chin in that one, 62-50, and I do think that they're going to get swallowed whole once again. I did set Colgate as a favorite of 12.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it in. Did set my total 134.5. This is a completely different Colgate team than we've seen in past years, though. I think we went a little bit too low with this total. First time these two teams match up. Both teams shot below 21% from three, and I think they're going to be a little bit warmer in this spot. So, going to be willing to go with the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Colgate. 3-6-5-0-7, 3-6-5-0-8. Boston U is going to be playing us with Lehigh. Lehigh is a 1-point road favorite, and your total on this game, it is 140. I did set my total at a 136. I'm diving in on the under. For Lehigh, this has been really the most up-tempo team that we've seen in the Patriot League this year in terms of total possessions per game. This Lehigh team is checking in 80th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, for Boston U, 319th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But Boston U has been able to do a really good job with their defense in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Boston U 75th in all of college basketball. Strangest split ever, though. They are giving up north of 10 points more per 1 hour possessions when they leave home rather than when they are at home. It really doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense at all. And for this Boston U team, they're a relatively okay team at being able to hit the glass. Owen Landrum has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game, but other than Miles Brewster, you really don't have a double-figure score for this bunch. Boston U, they should be able to have the advantage down low, though 118th in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, this Lehigh team, they're checking in with their rebound rate more around 225th, and for Lehigh, they do now have back in the fold really all their top scorers. They were dealing with injuries towards the middle half of the season. You've had Tyler Whitney-Sidney be the main constant for the team. He's been able to supply the team with about 15 points per contest. Getting back Keith Higgins is big. He's able to give you 13 points per contest, but it is a Lehigh team that only shoot about 32.5% from 3 points. A little bit of a leg up here in that their top 7 scores, all but one of them does shoot at least 76% at the free throw line, which is something that you do like to see against a Boston U team that is outside the top 310 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. But this is also a Lehigh team that is 275th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Boston U more on 212th with this regard. So interesting circumstance here. I do think the Boston U going to be able to win from within. I do think that this turns into a little bit of a lower scoring slog as well. We have seen Lehigh be slowing things down a little bit, and their defense honestly comes in good form. For Lehigh, they've given up 64 points or fewer in each of their last 5 games. For Boston U, they've actually been able to get to at least 70 points in 3 of their last 4 games. The one exception was when these two teams played an overtime game. Boston U went on the road, won that game 64-62 in a game where Lehigh did shoot 8 of 21 from 3-point range, but Lehigh lost the battle on glass, and I think that we see something similar here. I set Boston U as a 2-point favorite, taking them as a money line underdog at home, and set my total 136, also looking at the under. Now these last 2 games are out there for the Southland Tournament, 306-509, 306-510. This is from the Legacy Center in Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana. It's going to be playing against New Orleans. New Orleans, an underdog of 6.5 points on this game, 146.5 with Southeast Louisiana. I did set them as an 8.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Southeast Louisiana. They just are leaps and bounds better right now than New Orleans in pretty much all aspects except for one. New Orleans is going to have the best player out there on the floor in Jordan Johnson, who's able to supply 21.5 points, 4 assists. I'll correct that. Not necessarily the best player, but the best scorer out there on the floor, because I do like what I'm seeing out of this duo for Southeast Louisiana in Roger McFarland along with Nick Caldwell. These 2 guys, they combine for about 30 points per contest. McFarland is able to give you 8.5 boards, shoots in the mid-30s from 3-point range. Caldwell is shooting about 42% from 3-point range, and you get to go up against a New Orleans team that they're just really not doing anything right at all on defense. This New Orleans bunch in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Lone thing I will say is that the 3-point shooting percentage actually goes down when they're on the road rather than at home, but they're also outside the top 330 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. In Southeast Louisiana, very much a Sloan-controlled team. They're outside the top 250 in terms of total possessions per game, and it's been an up and down year for them as well. They're only about 234th in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but the perimeter defense has gotten better as the season has went along. Overall, they're about 164th in all of college basketball in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but since the turn of the calendar, that's been more of a top 100 mark for a Southeast Louisiana team that they do turn the ball for 13 3.5 times per game. They need to clean that up. While Roscoe Eastmont does give you 6.5 assists per game, they do turn the ball over about 3.5 times per contest, and New Orleans is a okay team at being able to generate turnovers. New Orleans just has absolutely nothing on the glass. Jamon Vincent, Tyson Jackson are the lone two guys on the roster that give you north of 3.5 rebounds per game. Both of these guys are undersized big men that combine for about 11.5 boards per contest, and for Southeast Louisiana, they're about 162nd in all of college basketball. Someone like a Brody Woodbury is able to give you about 5 to 6 rebounds per game, actually provides a little bit of size. Meanwhile, New Orleans is just completely outgunned with this aspect, 346th in all of college basketball on this front, and for New Orleans, they come in bad form with their offense. 67 points for fewer in 3 of the last 4 games, and last time Southeast Louisiana and New Orleans did battle, Southeast Louisiana got a nice 77-67 win. In that game, New Orleans shot just 3 of 22 from 3-point range. I do think that they're going to be a little bit warmer with their shooting here, but for Southeast Louisiana, they won that game despite the fact that they had 22 turnovers. I do think that they're going to clean that up a little bit as well, but I think that you get a relatively similar total. I think that New Orleans heats up with their 3-point shooting, but Southeast Louisiana, they're able to set up and they're able to bog this game down a little bit more with fewer turnovers. So did set my total 144.5 here at the 146.5. I like the under. I'm Southeast Louisiana. I'm going to lay up to 8 with them. Set them as an 8.5-point favorite, and we're going to have things up with 306.5-11, 306.5-12. Northwestern State is going to be playing against Texas A&M Commerce. Commerce is a 1-point favorite to a pick'em. Totals between 136.5 and 137. With Northwestern State, I did set them as the 1.5-point favorite. I'm going to be taking them as a pick'em / a money line underdog. For Texas A&M Commerce, they do a relatively solid job being a top 100 team in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, but they've got right now 2 guys that are active that are giving you north of 8.5 points per game because they've been dealing with the injury to Jerome Brewer. He's been out since mid-February, was able to supply the team with about 13.5 points per contest, so that means that a pair of guys in Kalen Williams along Tommy Lewis, they have to really just take hold of the offense. They've been able to combine for about 5.5 assists, 2.5 steals per contest, and Lewis shoots 35% from 3, but this is a Texas A&M Commerce team that is a bottom 20 team in terms of their rebound rate. Now, Northwestern State, they're outside the top 300 in terms of their rebound rate as well. They don't have a single guy on the roster that is active that's giving you north of 4.7 rebounds per game, but I like the way that Justin Wilson has been able to give this team a little bit more down low. He comes in surging, having been able to pull down at least 6 rebounds in each of the team's last 5 games, 9+ points in every one of those contests as well. He's 6'9". He should be able to win that fight down low. You've also got, in my opinion, the best scorer in this game in Cliff Davis on the side of Northwestern State, shooting 39.5% from 3-point range. He's been able to come in with at least 10 points in 3 of the last 4 games as well. And these 2 teams actually played a 3-overtime game a few weeks ago. That was a game that was 57-57 at the end of regulation. So if you took the under there, my goodness, that was rough. As neither team shot above 26% from 3. He got the over because he played 3 overtimes. But I do think that for Northwestern State, they're just going to be able to do the little things a bit better. They won that rebound battle in that game. They did lose the turnover battle 16-11, and this Commerce team does a little bit of a better job of being able to generate turnovers, but you just don't have a lot of depth in terms of this team as well. They've been dealing with injuries to Zandera Garrick all throughout the season as well. He's another guy that's applying about 7 points per contest. He's been out of the fold for quite a while. Kawu Agwa just returned to the fold for this team. He had to play 38 minutes in triple overtime after he had been out for multiple weeks. So this team is very much dealing with a bunch of injuries. And for Northwestern State, even though the metrics are really bad, they're outside like the top 275 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They do have one thing going for them. They do a nice job of being able to guard the 3-point arc for Northwestern State. They're a top 125 team in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. Texas A&M Commerce, they're more around 231st with this aspect. And I do think that with Northwestern State having a little bit more on the glass, they find a way to get the job done. Last time these 2 teams played, the only reason why you got the over was in triple overtime, and I think that this is going to be another low-scoring slog. Set by total 135.5, looking at the under and Northwestern State on the money line, and that'll wrap things up for the Sunday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Eli Boettger, who does amazing work over at HXCBB, for joining me in the live segment. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter / X timeline at Jaden_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM. Name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season. That means I'll be coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.